Okay, guys, we have had the preamble, and we are now, the Black Watch has not fallen, but they made them pay. Guys, war pugs, it's time to sit back and learn a little bit more about the Amaris Civil War. Now, because of the fact that you guys Battletech Tuesdays is what I'm going to call it, okay? So we're going to be doing Battletech Tuesdays. We're going to be learning about Battletech. We're going to be learning about the houses, the lore, the clans, all that kind of stuff, okay? Azores, I know what that's like, bud. Like, this last weekend, it was like that for me. It was brutal. It was absolutely brutal. I am feeling better. I managed to get to today without being nauseated, so that means I'm coming out the other end of this. Was not fun at all dealing with that the last couple of weeks. Now, just because it's Battletech Tuesdays doesn't mean we're going to have Battletech Thursdays as well, okay? And what we're going to do, now I don't know if I'm going to be able to get through all of this tonight. We might have to do some more on Thursday, but I've been wanting to do more live streams. I've been talking about this forever. I have been talking about this forever. Veil of Darkness, welcome, bud. Okay, so, sitting back, I got my sups. It's also Taco Tuesday, which might be illegal in the Free Worlds League. I do not know. I don't know. Oh, good lord, Mordek. Alright, so, Friendly Wallflower, it's time for the true clusterfuck to begin? Yes, it's time. It is time. And Thanksgiving. Oh god, I can't do the rest of this on Thursday if I don't get it all done tonight. Yeah, the meds, they are strong. War pugs, let's get into this. It is Tex Talks Battletech. It is the Black Pants Legion. It's the Amaris Civil War. Let's rock.
Attention, Freebird Scout. I am the Khan of Smoke Jacket. You will surrender immediately.
Okay.
Be destroyed.
Okay,
Or climbs the
class,
clock.
sit down and shut up.
Okay.
We're going to get through this lesson before we evacuate.
Let's do it.
You did pay me, after all, and this professor needs
Oh, and by the way, I have Battletech and Mechwarrior 5. I've just never played them. Not saying any streams might be coming up, I'm just saying.
those student vouchers for booze money. Also, regrettably, it looks like the clanners figured out where I live, and those jokes didn't go over so well. Smoked Jaguar, indeed.
Yeah.
How dare you mock my noble lineage? This is a notice of battle.
Excuse me, fucko. Firstly, interrupting a class is rude. Secondly, this lecture is about Star League, so it's like Baskin-Robbins' 51 flavors of dishonorable. Don't you want these guys to know their history of the noble Star League? Of the glories of General Kerensky himself?
I am sorry. Can I sit in?
No.
I will still review later.
Yeah, sure, I guess.
Okay.
Just don't go through the wall and take a seat in the back.
Ah, noble founder. This is a good lecture.
Recap.
In part 1 of this series, we introduced the brave, the bold, the crazy, and the just plain unfortunate souls who took part in this series of events.
I would not call this guy an unfortunate soul. I would call him an idiot.
In the beginning, we explored the formation of Star League, a grand, unifying government built around a centralized, efficient bureaucracy encompassing the great 5 houses of the Inner Sphere.
Yes.
We highlighted key events contributing to its growth, rise, peak, and then gradual collapse from increasingly difficult political turmoil. In part 1, we studied the formation of the SLDF, the single largest military instrument ever created, and it...
Prophet, thank you, bud. Today, I heard someone say, damn, that is a sexy spider. You're in the military, my guy. You're going to hear a lot worse.
Its utilization
a lot worse.
To brutally bring
Thanks,
the
bud.
periphery in line at gunpoint. Because the inner sphere likes a free real estate deal above everything else.
It's free real
I
estate.
also learned that Stefan Amaris, through his scheming, and scheming alone, managed to destabilize an increasingly shaky government by removing the head of state.
Literally.
Quite literally in this case.
Yes.
To accomplish this, he gambled everything he had. He'd started a war. He put people into the right place at the right time to take control. Together, we discovered that he was a man driven to avenge personal slights against his family, his nation, and his honor by House Cameron, and by extension, Starleague. He'd acted out of lust for power,
Get some chips quick.
vengeance, and
Go for it, Red Hawk.
personal vendetta. He alone, through his actions, toppled the old regime through a masterfully orchestrated coup. His forces being in perfect position to seize the hegemony in a single act of magnificent barbarism and cruelty.
Yeah.
And it is of note that he nearly failed because of the bagpipe, whiskey, and madness-fueled royal unit that was the glorious Black Watch.
Scotland forever.
Yeah, the mad stand of the Black Watch is a tale still told with reverence between Mechwarriors for generations now. And it's very important to understand that in dying the way they did, they sent a message. This wasn't going to be as easy as Amaris had thought. In a magnificent moment of glorious defiance, in a blaze of crazy, mad bastardism, Amaris was reminded of how fragile a thing like victory truly is.
I've never heard it referred to as such, but mad bastardism? I like it.
And this brush with near death would never leave him. Amaris would, in fact, take increasingly paranoid steps to ensure his reign was secure. He was, in my opinion, haunted by what might have been, and what may yet be. The Black Watch and their death were just a moment in history, but for Amaris they were a fearful, constant reminder of how easy it could have gone the other way.
Azores, is it kind of like corpse husbands?
But we will get to that soon enough. In the last episode, we also had our introductory study in the profile and career of General Kerensky. We saw how he tried to do his best to keep things as they were, in a delicate political balance and in certainly uncertain times. Kerensky was a powerful general, to be certain, but he was tasked with raising a First Lord in a very uncertain political arena.
Yeah, Azores, corpse husband has a really, really deep voice, and it's because of a problem with acid that he has, and a couple of other illnesses that he's had throughout his life.
Starleague was in decline, and this heir presumptively could have reversed the course of history. He did his best as an advisor and protector, but ultimately he fell back on what he knew best, his duty and oaths to Starleague above all, and that would ultimately doom his efforts. But we'll get to that. And lastly, in part 1, we set the ground for the throwdown of throwdowns, the guerra on Terra, a war so big it would shake the foundation of the inner sphere and lead to centuries of violence, political turmoil, adventurism, and chaos. As you may recall, we left this lesson on a wonderful cliffhanger. Amaris had contacted Kerensky and offered everything. A place in the new regime, ultimate power as a general, if not warlord, and very potentially a very real place as inheritor of Star League itself. But, tempted with everything, the keys to power and the right to use it as he saw fit, Kerensky remembered above all his duty to his oaths, Star League above all. Kerensky had said no. And it wouldn't be the last time. So here we are, at the Amaris Civil War.
Yes.
Warning, if you haven't seen part 1, I'd recommend it. Anyways, introduction over, recap over. Here we go. If the theme to part 1 was the death of Richard Cameron and the after effects of the initial coup, the theme to part 2 is the death of Star League. Buckle up, lads. It's going to be a long one.
Buckle up, Butteroo.
The Amaris Civil War would rage from 2766 to 2780 in a 14-year campaign that would decide the ultimate fate of Star League. It would cost in the end humanity generations of lives in indiscriminate slaughter.
Joy.
Each and every weapon ever crafted by humanity would be used in the greatest contest of wills, arms, and armies ever seen. This war was the end result of, and made worse by, a seemingly endless arms race that until now lacked an outlet for its destructive energies. This was a war unlike any other in the history of man up to this point, so comparisons are hard to make directly. For the first time, humanity was at war with itself across the entire span of the inner sphere. From the Rimworld's republic to the Terran hegemony, this world would touch hundreds of worlds, leaving many blasted, irradiated, and broken wastelands in its wake. This was a war that seldom offered any quarter, and civilian populations died in terror as increasingly destructive weapons were utilized by desperate combatants. This was a war where slaughter was the norm, and strategic weapons were just another tool. At least in the eyes of Amaris.
Of course, in the eyes of Amaris. Amaris was a... Yeah!
Their civil war started with surgical precision as a calculated coup. And when Amaris turned from coup phase to an actual war footing, both his Rimworld's Republic and the SLDF stood atop tremendous, though wholly different resources to commit to their campaign. The grand prize in all of this was control of the Terran hegemony, the potential rule of Star League itself, and by extension, the future of the Inner Sphere. For the sake of historical note, I will have to try to explain something here. While Kerensky was busy in the periphery, Amaris had struck and struck well. The head of House Cameron was vaporized. The inheritors of that name dead or gone. And
Running.
it is keen to note that consolidating an empire isn't merely a change of flags.
No.
Further, when he came under attack by mad bastards who loved kilts, bagpipes, and murder, though not necessarily in that order, he had been reminded on the pain of hubris. Again, for the record, I say this event scarred Amaris. For Amaris was reminded that he was mortal, and that it took the use of tactical nukes and many of his best men to stop people so angry they refused to die.
The Black Watch quite literally tore him a new one. Tore him an absolute new one. And it's actually impressive how much they got done. Drunk Scotsmen just get shit done, okay?
Is again my opinion of record that the Black Watch haunted Amaris in ways he'd never considered possible. It's not surprising that he'd be unable to forget the Black Watch. After all, their resistance was quickly becoming a legend. And when a unit's favorite grenade is satchel charges, it seems to leave an impression at the very least. But in the aftermath of nearly dying to the batshit madness of the Black Watch, that brush with the possibility of a gruesome end and failure had, again, in my opinion, a profound effect on Amaris. My evidence is the historical note that he became increasingly paranoid after this event and began to clamp down on the population to ensure, at any cost, he would be safe. Coup secured, Amaris did not just sit idle. Again, as building an empire isn't something you can handle with a pen. No.
The Golden Corral still sponsors him. Right.
Empires are forged by the sword. To the point, in the first week of January, Amaris imported tens of thousands of hand-picked, utterly loyal men from the Rimworld's Republic that would serve as the foundation for the hegemony security forces. Their aim? To make problems go away.
Vanish.
By go away, I mean root out dissidents, naysayers, or anyone with any strong objection to Amaris' rule and make them disappear by any means possible.
Okay.
These agents forming the hegemony security forces would, through their calculated, state-sponsored cruelty, give Amaris the power he'd aspired for.
I'm surprised he didn't call it the People's Liberation Army. I'm just saying.
Excesses in cruel methodology would haunt the worlds they touched for generations. Publicly, Amaris insisted on at least pretending things were normal. Normal for Amaris' taste, anyhow.
Okay.
To gain the barest sliver of legitimacy as a ruling power, he called for immediate votes for a new Director General of the hegemony, and further the appearance of legitimacy by directly appointing a hegemony noble to serve in the interim until a vote could be had. The vote for the new hegemony Director General was organized swiftly through the widespread placement of the new hegemony security forces and thorough integration of Rimworld's Republic units throughout the occupied territory prior to the coup. The vote was held despite widespread destruction, panic, and near-total communications breakdown during the coup, and limited repair afterwards. Further, there was the consideration that hegemony analysts projected at best a 10% turnout for the vote, considering the widespread issues with organizing a vote in a chaotic post-coup state. But that wouldn't do for Amaris. He had a new empire to run after all. Amaris claimed an 85% turnout, with 70% overwhelmingly voting for Amaris. This was a fairly amazing feat considering many of these worlds were cut off from the HPG network and over half the planetary governors were dead or missing.
Yeah, death really changes people, you know. I never thought that, I just never thought the Cameron dynasty would vote for Amaris himself. I don't understand.
Regardless of the legality, Amaris had his title. Those who did report favorable voting turnout did so under extreme duress.
Yeah.
But that hardly mattered, as Amaris was, at least provisionally, now the legal Director General of the Terran hegemony. This was abhorrent and horrific to the ruling classes, but it would set the acceptable precedent for generations afterward in practical regime change throughout the Inner Sphere. Once installed as the new Director General of the Terran hegemony, he promised
the Golden Corral signs. Oh my God.
a grand new era of peace and prosperity, that House Cameron's foolishness and mistakes were now at an end, and that the future would be one of unity under his guiding hand. This was not to be just a new hegemony, but a new Star League, reborn as an empire under the guiding vision and limitless power of a new emperor, bold enough to seize it. The HPG networks not critically damaged were slowly reactivated, with the first circuit of SL Comnet firing up to deliver the announcement of Amaris' new empire. Kerensky was the first to issue A reality check. Kerensky's response was legend. No. The major houses offered something more ambivalent, though.
Yeah.
Silence. The great houses did not lend him legitimacy, but they also did not mourn the fall of House Cameron. In a way, their silence answered many questions. First, it demonstrated their feelings about House Cameron. Richard Cameron suddenly disappearing after making some exceptionally poor decisions was seen as a favor, if not boon, to the great houses.
When you walk into the collection of the five most powerful people aside from yourself, and they're just like, hey, give up your militaries, I'll take care of you. You're not going to get good responses, I'm just saying.
There was to be no more meddlesome madness from a fading line of bad rulers. No more directives, laws, or missives from a child playing God. But their silence also spoke volumes of the current assessment of the power balance. They were afraid, after all, and had every right to be. Amaris had done the impossible. He had orchestrated the defeat of the hegemony by stabbing it in the heart. He'd taken the head off the beast, so to speak. He'd overcome defenses designed to be impregnable, and he'd even given the SLDF a black eye. He had done the impossible and done so in such a way as they wondered what else might he have up his sleeve. They considered, was Amaris waiting to topple them as well and challenging them to make the first move? In addition, you have to consider that individually the House militaries were somewhat limited by the preceding decades of Star League buildup. They'd been given every excuse to put trust in the SLDF and had done so as arms buildups were exceptionally, if not prohibitively, expensive.
Yes.
Also, SLDF Charter had regulated the size of their militaries, and as such, they knew if they defied and then openly challenged Amaris, they might find themselves overthrown in the name of whatever the hell Amaris was smoking. But on the other hand, they also knew that if Kerensky returned and managed to restore the status quo, any assistance or compliance given to Amaris would become, perhaps, problematic. As such, the House Lords said nothing, and chose no sides, at least officially. However, it is interesting to note that the great houses immediately asked General Kerensky's intentions, and for him to report his movements.
Yep.
The House Lords' response is reasonable. They had their own issues on their own home soil. You see, the Star League bureaucracy wasn't doing so well, and that somewhat made things difficult from an organizational standpoint.
It's actually a very, very good strategy when there is uncertainty. Now, the only way that it doesn't pan out your favor is if the person that you're doing it to just happens to be called the Emperor of Mankind. Because if you do it to the Emperor of Mankind, your firstborn kids wind up serving in a regiment of Imperial Guard in perpetuity, and you're called the Vestroyan Firstborn at that point. Hey, Repress, thanks, bud. Hope you're doing well, my friend. I hope you're doing good, too. Always happy to support. Also secretly trying to fund a day off for you so you can binge upon gaming or lore. Take care. Jesus Christ, dude. I appreciate it. Yeah, like, this is actually an extremely good thing to do. Because if nothing happens, if Kerensky doesn't pan out, if there's no reprisal coming, you can just throw your support behind the new regime. If there is a reprisal coming, you can sit back and wait to see who's going to have the best, put your house in the best advantage, and then side with them. It really just depends. One of the worst things that you can do is move too fast, and with the houses being in the positions of power they were, I mean, it was the best idea to literally do nothing.
SLDF bureaucrats didn't know what to do.
Good, Slacker. Awesome.
From the hegemony from a usurper.
Thank you, Repress. I appreciate it, bud.
From a general far, far away. Follow instructions of the great house institutions they supported and paralleled. This wasn't just the case of paperwork and who stamps what. This was a financial network and banking system that held the wealth of billions upon billions of taxpayers.
You could do that, Gallon.
This was the civil infrastructure and logistics system of the greatest nation ever formed. Bureaucrats across the inner sphere struggled with what to do. They were, after all, in a crisis of leadership. With communications difficulties, lack of orders, or in some cases countermanding orders, plus the House Lords offering integration opportunities with their existing systems, many bureaucrats just went home or found new jobs with their house governments, and when their checks started to bounce, they decided to walk away. Some civil servants desperately tried to maintain what services they could, believing in Starleague as it fell, believing it may return someday. Most, however, turned their assets and holdings over to the great houses in their jurisdictional territory, choosing to side with a stable government over one ruled by a potential psychopath.
This is always a good
Throughout
plan.
Starleague, the overnight conquest of the hegemony destabilized the Starleague dollar, causing widespread economic chaos. The outages of the HPG network further caused rampant speculation and market woes. Without regulatory control or banking afforded by the Starleague financial institutions now either being abandoned or co-opted by the great houses, people pulled their money out of once safe Starleague investments.
Oh. Thank you, Repress. It's actually possible to say sexy spider and not sound crazy thanks to a show called Monster Musume. That holy abomination of anime will help you discover fetishes you did not know were possible. 10 out of 10, yet would not recommend. Okay. Thank you, Repress. Guys, the Hospitaler, she likes funny animes. She likes lewd animes. Okay? I don't understand it. That's what she likes. There you go. She loves Konosuba for that reason. I'm just saying. And this crap here. Instability, stock market crashing, it's all the sadness. It's all the sadness, flat out.
Throughout the inner sphere, investors transferred enormous wealth from what was once...
So basically, Amaris took it, he just didn't know how to keep it from crashing down. He just screwed it up. Again, I appreciate it, Repressed. Much appreciated.
Saved Starleague monetary investments and bonds into house bills as soon as they were able. Folks saw the writing on the wall and voted with their wallet. To the common citizen, Starleague as an investment, either financially or the future, was doomed. And as General Kerensky carefully deliberated his actions, as he knew full well that rash action in this time
security
would doom the cause of Starleague, Amaris
Free Fiesta
to
Pale
reshape the hegemony into his new empire. For to occupy a nation, as stated before, is one thing, but to reshape it, that takes time. As stated earlier, Amaris had founded the Hegemony Security Forces, and those began rapidly forming huge contingents on every occupied hegemony world, recruiting most heavily from those least loyal to Starleague, least loyal to the Camerons, and most swayed by money or the promise of power. Amaris also formed the Director General's Office of Policy and Doctrine. This was more or less an exported extension of Amaris's practice in his homeland, a political officer's corps to police wrongthing.
Oh, joy.
Boys and girls, Amaris hated wrongthing.
Oh, of course he does.
Amaris punished wrongthing.
Oh, really?
And wrongthing was defined as anything Amaris didn't like. To eliminate any anti-Amaris sentiment, OPD officers were placed in every government office and building across the hegemony to ensure total compliance with every new governmental policy and memorandum.
Yeah, guys, stock in the Star League is tanking.
OPD officers bugged public and private places, eavesdropped on all conversation, monitored all communications traffic, and watched with practiced eyes all actions taken by any citizen of this new empire. And under their gaze, suspicion alone was enough to warrant severe reprisals.
Oh, good God.
The Terran hegemony was now, in essence, little more than a garrisoned, heavily occupied police state.
Lovely.
Internal security policing actions resulted in the formation of enormous gulags, over which 200,000 were sent the first year alone.
I was waiting for it. The gulags are here, baby.
Few, if any,
of course, if any gets
returned.
misinformation.
Amaris's goons promised great monetary rewards for reporting traitors, disloyal citizens, outspoken critics, or even the barest suggestion of subversive activity.
Oh,
Soon,
yes.
friends and family turned on each other out of desperation or fear. The state was all, and Comrade Amaris was the state.
Joy.
By April that year, Amaris had formally begun the recruiting and training of some 30 divisions to replace and reinforce his holdings on the hegemony. They were raised from hegemony worlds, but trained, led, and equipped by Rimworld's Republic forces. Every defensible position on any garrisoned world was turned into a massively reinforced fortress. The streets of the hegemony were now policed by men rewarded for brutality and wiping out even the barest notion of dissent with overwhelming violence.
So basically, like the Morian Iron Guard, only lacking the snazzy uniforms and, any semblance of dignity. Gotcha.
Reports of death squads roaming the street became commonplace.
Joy.
Outspoken individuals, former SLDF officers, their families and friends all disappeared or fled. Those who criticized the regime or its actions were swiftly erased from history. Amaris's regime had no place for fence-sitters. You were either pro-Amaris, or you were fucking dead.
Okay.
Mercenaries loyal to Amaris were used to conduct the least tasteful work, or at least the work that required a certain essence of plausible deniability. For unsavory purposes, Amaris had retained the infamous mercenary unit, the Greenhaven Gestapo. They were at first just a group of highly morally flexible advisors to Stefan Amaris, but he found their contributions in taking the hegemony worth rewarding.
I'm sorry, the Greenhaven Gestapo? Why don't you, with a name like that, everybody should have known shit was about to go down before they even got the power that they had. You might as well call yourself the Kitten Punchers if we're going to go down that route.
Ruthless and efficient, the Mercs were exactly what Amaris prized. Later on, their war crimes would be a permanent scar on his regime.
Great.
As stated, the Greenhaven Gestapo was instrumental in the seizing of main Terran government buildings, in displays of savagery and brutality much in line with Amaris's designs. However, once they were turned on the civilian population, things quickly degenerated into looting, pillaging, and murder in the name of state security.
Good times rhymes with war crimes.
Mercenaries at heart, the Greenhaven Gestapo decided to make some quick coin and sacked Rome. Why? Well, it was the mercenary tradition long-standing at that time through centuries back to sack Rome, as Rome was historically always a good choice for quick cash and good ransom.
Okay.
Being largely undefended with little in the way of organized resistance, Rome quickly bent to their occupation.
Rome itself? Like, legitimately Rome. Legitimately Rome. Repressed. Oh my god, dude. Thank you, dude. I appreciate it. Last one, sadly, but if it's lewd she likes, she'll love Monster Mizume. Hold on a second. She just came downstairs. Babe. Woman. She's ignoring me. She's probably got her earbuds on. She's probably got her earbuds on. Will require DVD purchases. It was too much for Crunchyroll. That's what you will be dealing with. Check out the opening if you're brave enough. Good Christmas gift. She likes this kind of stuff, dude. I'll have to find a way to stream it online. I know that like she's pretty much poured through Crunchyroll. Like there is nothing left in Crunchyroll. I'm just saying she has gotten it all. Oh my God! Thank you, Repressed. Vatican City, really? The Vatican in particular? Amaris is a lot of good times set for himself. Dude, he needs to do a good time for that mustache. That mustache is still busted. Just like 1527. Can't show that on the channel. Get taken down. Oh, boy.
And as history will indicate,
Thank you, Repressed. Jesus Christ.
States. For example, one of their commanders had a portrait of himself spray-painted over the Sistine Chapel.
Thank you. Thunderclap, man. I appreciate it. You can find most anime on High Anime. Might have to check that out, General Jedi.
150 Catholic monks had a hunger strike in the square. A member of the Greenhaven Gestapo blocked them in with his rampage and stomped them flat. And then they went further with their fun.
Oh.
They then arrested the Pope after he refused to point out priests who were disloyal to the regime.
Really?
3 years later, they'd murder the Pope after he refused to cooperate. Through his mercs, Amaris didn't just target Catholics either. Amaris was, after all, a true atheist and decided the universe was a neater place without the complexities of an organized religion. His death squads oppressed all regardless of their faith, for he had room for only one form of worship, to the person and glory of Stephan Amaris. All others were impediments to his operations. Such impediments were removed with ruthless precision. Soon enough, the everyday citizen of his new empire would find themselves under his whip. Amaris made hugely unrealistic demands from the population at large, but all the more from its workers and factories. Workers were brutally beaten, tortured, and executed for failing to meet insane projected production schedules.
Good.
Meeting quotas was rewarded with additional quotas. People worked their fingers to the bone to earn the reward of bony fingers. Food and medicine were in short supply, a supply regulated by priority toward people Amaris saw as doing what he wanted. The economy switched to a war footing as Amaris entrenched every world he could, building strategic weapons stockpiles for what he saw as the inevitable showdown. Factories were increasingly turned over to weapons production, ammunitions production. Fuel and tires and uniforms were churned out in massive stockpiles and put away for the coming storm. Consumer goods disappeared from stores nearly entirely, as supplies other than war material began to run low.
Great.
All worlds were given increasingly ridiculous production quotas and exhaustive production schedules. This was complicated by Amaris continuing to raise armies and garrisons, further depleting the worlds of their effective labor forces. And some complained, stating they couldn't both raise armies and equip them. However, complaints were not acceptable under Amaris' regime.
Of course.
If a world complained or even reported food shortages, food was withheld and the entire world was punished.
I'd say we haven't, that this was unrealistic, but all I have to do is look at Stalinist Russia, and then it's really easy to see this happening again. This guy is a thunder cunt. I'm just saying.
Troubles mounting, Amaris soon began to see problems everywhere. People refusing to believe in him were punished. Worlds he suspected of treason he punished. Populations that pushed back were punished. The civilian situation increasingly worsened throughout the hegemony as Amaris squeezed the people for all they had. Food and medical supplies were soon in critical shortage, and he withheld them routinely as yet another measure of punishment. People begging to be fed was just another punishable crime in Amaris' new empire.
Great.
And after seeing the excesses of Amaris' consolidation of power, of the SLDF being deleted from the hegemony with nuclear, biological, and chemical attacks, of the bureaucrats being shot at their desks for refusing to move a stamp, most citizens realized they had to deal with the realities of the present rather than hope for a brighter tomorrow. After all, they'd seen those who resisted in the initial stages of the takeover being turned into radioactive sinkholes. Hope was, essentially, dead. Slowly but surely, the hegemony descended into a siege mentality, building stockpiles and defenses for the coming long war. Through excesses in human suffering, Amaris made significant headway. He reinforced the hegemony in ways the Star League never considered. He knew the shortcomings of Star League's extensively planned defenses, for he'd found weaknesses in and exploited them after all.
Right.
Through hard work and exceptional human suffering, he turned peaceful yet defensible worlds into hellish death traps.
The uniform. I see what they did there.
He reinforced every fortification for any conceivable attack, siege, or protracted battle. He ordered his men to drill exhaustively and to constantly train to avoid embarrassment like the 4th Amaris Dragoons fighting mad bastards wearing kilts. He ordered the construction of bunkers, hardened defensive points, and extensive space-borne defenses as well. Please try to understand that Amaris, while having extensively prepared, knew the full might of the SLDF Navy, which was enormous and quite inclined to fuck things up if given the opportunity. The war
That's
in the
always a good
stars
thing.
went well for Amaris because his men got lucky, and after several bloody fights seized the space defense network. But he knew the bulk of the Navy would return with Kerensky, and so men were trained extensively on the operation of established space defense systems. These space defense systems would figure heavily into Amaris' plans, as his navy suffered heavily in pushing the SLDF out of the hegemony in the initial stages of the coup. The Star League Navy had accounted for itself well, and there were holdouts still hiding in the hegemony, doing much to harass and spy on Amaris' doings from secret locations.
Emperor Eagle proper posture is a crime against Amaris.
I may,
have you seen that gremlin?
if you all are interested, do a whole talk on the grand old Star League Navy, but I'll spare the details for now, as that would be yet another hour. Let me know. Might be fun anyways. Worlds under Amaris' thumb were patrolled for the first sight of the SLDF. Drone ships constantly hunted the hegemony for even the smallest observation craft, making intelligence gathering for the SLDF a precarious venture, if not a lethal operation. As now established, each house, now concerned with many possible futures and not wanting to back a loser, decided to mostly stay out of it. As such, the war
Haven't
broke
seen him yet,
down
Leon.
to the principal antagonists. Side A was the forces of Stefan Amaris, leading the occupied Terran hegemony systems, including their now extensively reinforced defenses growing stronger by the day. Further, he was aided by powerful defense industries in the hegemony long established as the primary arms producers of the Inner Sphere. He held these in addition to the Ascendant Rimworld's Republic, which he had secretly prepared its industry, economy, and military specifically for this conflict. I won't be vague here. Let's put this into numbers.
Okay.
Amaris' own forces included at least 100 regiments of battle mechs alone. To keep in mind, a single regiment of battle mechs is 150 to 180 fucking mechs plus support divisions. Amaris also had the entire naval and aerospace assets of a great house many times over, through his house's careful preparation for the coup, minus the early lumps handed to him by the SLDF Navy. He maintained a strong grip on the Rimworld's Republic, in addition to all the hidden SLDF weapon stockpiles in the occupied hegemony. Historical notes show us that for decades, the SLDF had warned that the Rimworld's Republic was building an army many times over what they were allowed by Star League treaty.
The 301st Golden Corral Field Battalion.
Warnings that were now far too late. For the record here, there is some dispute over the total naval assets of Amaris, but it is said that he possessed over 270 warships prior to the coup, many of which were as good if not better than the SLDF fleet. House armies had 50 to 70 warships at most, and many of those were not line ships. Most House navies had a small core flotilla of capital vessels, and then the remainder was split between patrol and support vessels for anti-piracy duties. And as established, the Rimworld's Republic had patiently built a war machine for generations just for this single moment. Every industry and government plan had been laid down on the principled need to feed a war-fighting capacity, to challenge the SLDF openly if need be. Hell, Amaris had even built enormous battleships, which were better protected than SLDF's biggest warships. They called them the Amaris class, by the way.
Really? I had no idea that guy was going to name the damn battleship after himself. I mean, you know, he's earned it, you know.
Because
Prick.
Amaris is, well...
a prick.
Don't make me get the bib picture out again. The guy had issues.
Yeah, he did.
Issues that were only solved by, well, enormous battleships named after himself, because that's the kind of guy he was, and... Okay, we'll do this again. Look, he's wearing a bib. This guy has some problems. Who the fuck is holding his arm? Is that like the general manager for the Golden Corral of Space Kansas?
No, I don't know what the deal is, but I swear to God, her head is fucking massive for her body. Her head, like, seriously, what the hell? She can't wear a t-shirt ever. It will never happen. The second she tries to put on a t-shirt that would fit her, she stretches it out and busts it, okay? It's done. Like, her head is bigger than his and her body's half the size, okay? How can her neck support that much weight? We need to get engineering, like entire schools of engineers. We need to contact MIT about her neck. Because one, I can't even see it, and two, Jesus Christ, it looks like her torso is sitting on top of her where her head should be. That's how fucking big it is.
It's not inspiring. If you take someone's head off and brilliantly overcome the greatest defenses yet designed, wear something nice like...
And that unibrow is a bitch, man.
A smoking jacket. Editor, can we do that? And a top hat. Class him up a bit. I know people are gonna go nuts over someone so Machiavellian looking, just like a goof, but just class him up a bit, like 2 notches.
There you go.
Good. Better.
There we go.
Anyways, while Amaris had lost significant numbers of his navy to the initial space battles and the hegemony, he was now building new hulls on Star League yards and blueprints. Further, he was rapidly training his men thoroughly on the operation of the now captured SDS networks. Soon all that power would be firmly in his hands. Needless to say, Amaris was sitting on an enormous stockpile of world's weapons and personnel to throw into the fray. He was growing stronger by the day. He awaited Kerensky's next action, trying to bait him into attacking the hegemony directly after being bogged down. So, let's look at the opposite side of this equation.
Leon, the Emperor would just sit back. He'd take one look at what's going on, sit back, and just wait. And wait for this guy to completely and totally crack. And then he would just probably send a Corvus Corax. To be honest.
Side B of this conflict
right,
was
Slacker.
the
I don't have
SLDF,
anybody chained to a basement anywhere.
Huge multinational force
Yet.
which had now been bogged down in years of counterinsurgency fighting in the periphery. Worn down by years of hard campaigning spread across the entire periphery, bloodied and bitter at putting down a needless insurrection, and now devastated at the loss of their friends and comrades in the hegemony. The SLDF was certainly on the back foot from the beginning, not to mention now being completely cut off from any reinforcement or supply. Losses in the periphery uprising and rebellion,
Talburgers.
plus hegemony losses in the coup, put total SLDF manpower by 1,255 regiments. I'll say that again as a chill runs down your veteran friend's spine. 1,255 regiments. Gone. 30% of the SLDF's effective military strength from pre-war levels was now totally gone. History has shown us that armies rarely bounce back from losses such as these, if at all.
No.
The survivors were now hollow men and women haunted by a horrific, senseless war in the periphery, and now many of them were without a home, or a government, or a cause. The hegemony was occupied, and the status of the First Lord at this point was an unknown. Some would point out that the SLDF had the numerical advantage here, including far superior numbers and naval assets. It is worth noting that the SLDF was split into regional commands. In addition, Kerensky was unable to draw upon the additional resources from the great houses he expected, or even in the occupied hegemony. An army this large would soon need massive resupply before any campaign of conquest, and they had no infrastructure other than what they could seize and capture. There was no infrastructure to replace their extensive losses, no recruitment centers, no resupply and logistics train available. The great...
Your typical military unit, acceptable losses are around 13%. 13% is considered acceptable losses. Losses like this are Russia level.
Houses were not going to help them. They were on their own. Having an army all the larger than your opponent does no good when supplies run low or out. The SLDF was cut off and in a desperate state the day House Cameron fell. They had lost over 30% of their strength mauled into combat ineffectiveness in the periphery war. They had lost 1 million men before the coup had even started. Further, with the collapse of the Star League bureaucracy came the near total loss of operational budgets and supply. The SLDF at the start of 2767 had at best 10% of its former budget trickling in from tax collectors and administrators still loyal or alive. There would be no paychecks from here forward, and procurement divisions had no means to buy anything at any price. Things were grim.
Oh, how's the tiny black wolf?
Teetered on the brink. Kerensky's forces had fought a needless war. They had learned that their home was gone and their leader replaced by a madman. They had no money, no country, and seemingly no future. Supplies were exhausted, ships needed refit and overhaul, and spares disappeared. Morale was accordingly near zero. They needed a fucking miracle. What the Star League Defense Force had, though, was General Alexander Sergeyevich Kerensky, and angry Russians tend to make it into the history books. Kerensky had purpose and determination. Instead of weighing his options endlessly or sending his troops home, instead of obeying his government, instead of giving up and running away or trying to bargain and buy favor, Kerensky had told the usurper no, just flatly no. Amaris had mocked him in reply. Amaris had mocked him and challenged Kerensky to try to attack him. And it would have been suicidal, as the extensive space defense systems in the hegemony were designed to stop massed fleets and invasion forces. And as said, Amaris had paid the price in conquering them, and yet every moment that Amaris had in the hegemony he would be digging in and preparing to defend what he had claimed. It was an unenviable scenario to contemplate. Kerensky at this point had two choices: to drive into the hegemony immediately, to attack the Rimworld's Republic forces now deeply entrenched and in possession of the space defense systems and all the massive weapons stockpiles the hegemony had. Or Kerensky could go kick the shit out of Amaris' homeland, the Rimworld's Republic.
There we go.
Kerensky decided that if Amaris would occupy his home, then Kerensky could burn Amaris's down. Well, more or less. There were strategic considerations for this. Kerensky rarely acted out of emotion, so this wasn't just done out of pure spite or want to exact revenge. This wasn't ego-driven, but a more calculated response.
1 second, guys, 1 second. The wife is staring at me. Okay, sorry guys. She wants to walk by. I actually have a work bed set up over there. And she goes over there and sits down and either makes snarky comments at me when I'm trying to work or makes snarky comments at me when I'm doing anything else. She just makes snarky comments. Let's go.
Kerensky refused to fall for Amaris's trap and instead opted to hit Amaris's home to cut Amaris off from his beloved Rimworld's Republic, its resources, and any hope of significant reinforcement. As well, if the gamble proves successful, this would utterly trap Amaris's forces in the hegemony, buying Kerensky time to maneuver, politic, and perhaps involve the rest of the inner sphere. Additionally, the income of the Rimworld's Republic was exceptional, and by removing Amaris's purse strings even partially, he would make the inevitable throwdown in the hegemony far easier. Kerensky made his preparations. He told his men what they must do. He visited ships throughout the fleet and mustered his forces from jump points around the periphery. He made certain to immediately change the ciphers and communications keys for his entire fleet, as by now he was certain SLDF communications were totally compromised through Amaris's capture and control of the hegemony. Orders were often hand-carried and eyes only. This would be an ambitious undertaking, and there was no room for error. Kerensky told his men and women that they would be launching on a grand campaign to restore Starleague and stop Amaris. He gave appropriate speeches for morale's sake, reinforcing the purpose of his mission. This wasn't about revenge. This was about Starleague. For as long as they lived, the dream was alive. They were soldiers and sailors and had work to do. Through this, he reminded the fleet of its duty. They had a mission. He also made moves to mitigate the supply shortfalls as best possible. His war plan hinged on the ability to forage what they needed from the Rimworld's Republic. To feed a conquest in essence through conquest, he ordered parts of his own forces, his own ships, his own mechs, his own tanks and stockpiles to be cannibalized for the war effort. He radically increased his operational equipment stockpile by eliminating the most damaged ships, mechs, and tanks and stripped those of parts to keep the rest going. SLDF stockpiles were raided. Kerensky ordered sold what he didn't immediately need to war profiteers in the growing black market to keep the SLDF going. He merged ruined regiments into new combined regimental combat teams. He consolidated his forces and told them that they would conquer the Rimworld's Republic and take it from Amaris before liberating the hegemony and restoring rightful order. Kerensky was not keen to make rapid strikes without proper intelligence. Cautiously, Kerensky assessed his situation, seeing what he was up against in the Rimworld's Republic. Through his intelligence services, Kerensky suspected and then became aware of clandestine dealings in the inner sphere. Kurita had been a staunch supporter of Amaris and his dealings. Kerensky suspected that post-coup that arrangement was still in place. Meanwhile, House Merrick had
Kurita, of course,
extensively interfered with SLDF deployments during the Periphery War, and now, afterwards, were apathetic to the cause of the SLDF, to say the least. The source of that contention was personal animosity. Kerensky once had a young Kenyan Merrick on his general staff and checked his ambitions, and Merrick never forgot. These complications meant that Kerensky could only possibly count on the other houses as, at best, potential allies. Even then, their responses were not enthusiastic, but he knew they would at least not be maneuvering against him, and the Periphery had an altogether more interesting response. The Periphery really didn't care the Cameron line had ended with a bang. even if the whereabouts and status of Richard Cameron were currently unknown to the galaxy at large. The populations of the periphery did, however, care deeply when the SLDF showed up to fight a brutal war on their home turf.
Yep.
The SLDF had emboldened the periphery's long-standing anti-authoritarian, anti-inner streak by showing up to be exactly what they feared most, conquering assholes.
Yay!
But when Amaris took over, the periphery soon saw their savior really didn't care a single fuck about them all that much. Amaris had issued orders for Kerensky to conquer the periphery, to keep pressure on them, to crush them once and for all, and then to join Amaris's new empire. Upon realizing they were sold out, the periphery was upset.
A little
The
bit.
periphery had once at least somewhat trusted Amaris. After all, he was one of them. The Rimworld Republic was the greatest periphery nation, after all. He was the nice fat guy who'd given them shitloads of money and weapons and pointed them at the SLDF,
And he had opened up several golden corrals.
now they realized they'd been played. The periphery was now content to let Amaris deal with his own problems and let the SLDF leave uncontested. They had lost enough of their own and gained perhaps, at least notionally, their independence. They were content to let things be. After this point, the periphery would offer no substantial opposition for Kerensky's new goal, to wrecking ball the Rimworld Republic. In fact, many periphery states met with the general and provided him full transcripts, intelligence, and information on Amaris's duplicity and dealings. This information would make Kerensky's conquests all the smoother. Kerensky jumped on the Rimworld Republic with a slightly rejuvenated SLDF, and in time his conquest became a campaign of legend. While Amaris had taken the bulk of his military to occupy the hegemony, the Rimworld's Republic was not a complete pushover as far as the periphery states went. After all, this was the place that Amaris had forged into a conquering nation-state. It was a nation built by a paranoid, psychotic asshole.
You know what? I'd say something about this, but then I look at every Stellaris run that I've ever done and realize that I'm a paranoid, psychotic asshole in that game, and for some strange reason, I'm always building planet crackers, and yes, that is a king crab right there, just basically chilling out.
House Amaris had primed this nation for war at every level through generations of careful work to further their strategic aims. It maintained a reasonable standing army
why
by
not?
periphery standards. It possessed a ruthlessly efficient internal security force, a tremendous strategic reserve, a well-educated population, and a massive defense industry. Taking the Rimworld Republic was the smartest choice Kerensky could make. Taking it would cut Amaris off from extensively developed defense industry and ample recruiting grounds, not to mention a key source of income. On May 29, Kerensky issued the go order from his flagship McKenna's Pride. The fleet assembled at jump points, messages being hand-carried with new ciphers to ensure security. Across the periphery, forces abandoned their conquest to rejoin the main fleet, often carrying with them the contents of SLDF bases they'd stripped for necessary supplies. Troops falling back set nasty reminders that Starlink property was not to be trifled with. Concordat troops found that out the hard way, when upon entering a Starlink base it collapsed on their head after a mountain of charges went off. Similarly, across the periphery, Starlink bases were abandoned, trapped, and stripped of any and all resources Kerensky would need for his operation. This was an all-or-nothing gambit. Amaris had slowly bled the Rimworld Republic forces of their strength to set up his coup and occupation of the hegemony. It would still be a monumental endeavor. The Republic was enormous and well-provisioned, and while the Rimworld's Republic had dug in, they didn't have the numbers the SLDF massed fleet had. Every delay in attack would buy time for Amaris to fortify the Rimworld Republic and hegemony both. Any other commander would have opted for speed alone in a campaign of nuclear hellfire and motherfucking revenge. Any other commander would have let his men and women loose in the name of vengeance, to let slip the dogs of war and count the dead afterward. But Kerensky was not a monster. He refused to authorize a total war approach, and saved weapons of mass destruction for hardened military targets.
Okay.
But it would still be a war. There would be casualties. Kerensky took a careful approach, trying at his hardest to not indiscriminately slaughter his enemies for the sake of a decisive, rapid campaign. He didn't see the Rimworld's Republic as an enemy, merely, in this case, an adversary. He saw his job as to restore the peace from an unlawful usurper, not to punish a population or conquer purely to feed his army.
Good.
Further, Kerensky knew he had to crush the Rimworld's Republic to strand Amaris in the hegemony, to cut Amaris off from the resources of the Rimworld's Republic and prevent a difficult two-front war. Amaris flipped out at the impending invasion and almost immediately called on his hidden army in the form of formerly loyal periphery allies to assist. Most chose now to do what Kerensky had done to Amaris. Say no. Amaris had betrayed them, after all.
True.
A bare few moved to reinforce Amaris's holdings, but for the most part, the stage was set for what unfolded.
Well, Amaris sucks to suck. It sucks to suck, doesn't it?
Kerensky split his forces to conquer effectively, with commands each having objectives, timetables, and resources appropriate to their abilities and talents. Further, he split some of his forces to go conduct reconnaissance in the hegemony, just to poke at Amaris and make him wonder if it were all a diversion. Kerensky put half his army under the command of his trusted adjutant, General Aaron D. Chevalier. Their forces ran with 3 armies each and 4 in reserve. The plan was to rapidly punch through the hegemony and roll them up before any counterattack was possible, leaving the capital for last. Kerensky sent a message to Amaris' stooge running the Rimworld's Republic as Amaris was busy playing police state in the hegemony. Kerensky offered surrender and no ill treatment if the Rimworld's Republic would merely stand down. Amaris' stooge said no.
Of course.
Then Kerensky attacked. In theory, what Kerensky intended was considered to be near impossible, if not exceptionally difficult, and doubly so with an army that effectively had no reserve or logistical support other than what they carried, scrounged, or stole. If they took any significant losses, there was no real chance to replace anything. Their numbers of mechs, tanks, rifles, bullets, and band-aids were finite. At first, Kerensky was cautious, both to spare his own men material losses and the civilian population the cruelty of war. But when the hidden army failed to respond to Amaris and the Rimworld Republic failed to counterattack, it was on like Donkey Kong. And the outcome was pretty fucking incredible. Kerensky conquered all 248 worlds in 3 short years. To say this was a blitzkrieg is a massive understatement.
A little bit of
That's
one, yeah.
almost 7 worlds a month. 7 defended, garrison, militarized populations a month. One by one, the worlds fell like clockwork in a master plan. The SLDF was Kerensky's tempered vengeance visited upon Amaris' legacy while again carefully sparing damage to civilian infrastructure.
And that's the best way to go about it, because with the rate of conquest that he's had and him showing mercy, and with his message, he probably got a lot of support from the population.
Worse, unwilling to budge his own forces to assist, Amaris could only sit and watch from occupied Terra as his home went dark one system at a time.
Bye-bye.
The Rimworld Republic forces had the benefit of preparation and an extensive home field advantage. Further, they were bolstered by paramilitaries and extensive security forces. However, they didn't have the numbers of the SLDF. Kerensky embraced his tactical advantage and just steamrolled them into the earth while they died defending pointlessly. As the war rolled on, many Rimworld's units threw down their arms, risking the wrath of political officers none too pleased. The reason for abandoning the cause was simple. They saw themselves as citizens of the Rimworld's Republic first and supporters of Amaris as a distant second.
Yeah.
Amaris had failed them and they weren't willing to die for a bib-wearing overlord. No. They were more inclined to follow Kerensky, and some did. Kerensky allowed them to serve, and some would, with distinction, try to right the wrongs of their former overlord. That's not to say there weren't some holdouts. Some die-hard Rimworld's Republic soldiers would just feign surrender to detonate suicide vests, echoing the sentiments of the periphery just a few short years earlier. As the Rimworld's Republic government fell, armed militants and militias rose to fight their former overlords, the SLDF, or each other. Mass stockpiles of weapons found their way to the hands of increasingly angry populations intent on shooting anyone not aligned with their ideology. There was something else to consider as well. Authoritarians have a bad habit of leaving people in charge that they can trust rather than someone with a spine. Now,
the endless march of the yes men is something that, quite simply put, cannot be denied in the course of history when you're dealing with despots.
naturally, the administrator left in charge of the Rimworld's Republic, while loyal to Amaris and a capable bureaucrat, was, at most, a spineless yes-man. Kerensky conquered his way to the heart of the Rimworld's Republic in an impossibly short time span considering the above complications. I'm sparing you the details of a 3-year campaign at this juncture, so that I may perhaps revisit it in detail later for future broadcast. At the end of this campaign, all that was left was Apollo, the capital of the Rimworld's Republic. Kerensky had approached Apollo carefully, saving it for last. He'd thoroughly isolated it before this point, blocking HPG traffic that the SLDF decided the Rimworld's Republic didn't need to hear. Fleets patrolled the system to ensure no use of pirate points for messages or reinforcements, and jump points were now long secured by the SLDF. Kerensky wanted the leaders of the Rimworld's Republic to sit in communications blackout, wondering what the hell was going on, stewing in their own fear. In fact, Apollo had been cut off through careful maneuvering by Kerensky for well over a year by the time he struck.
Honestly, he could have sent them a message saying, "I've sent in the 8th," and they would have been terrified out of their wits. It's not because the 8th has really any significance, but it's just such a badass line, I'm just saying.
Kerensky took to the field, making planetfall himself to find loyalist Amaris forces engaged in a brutal suppression campaign against their own people. Further, newly constructed fortresses provided some resistance, though they were dangerously undermanned. Internal security had obviously been an issue for some time. Before long, the SLDF had things in hand, with defectors and surrendering Rimworld's forces deeply straining the SLDF's capacity to hold prisoners of war. By the time the SLDF dropped in on the grand capital of the Rimworld's Republic, the SLDF were seen as heroes and liberators by a war-weary population.
Well, there you go.
The average Rimworld citizen had long been under the thumb of a ruthless tyrant from a family of tyrants, and for the first time in their lives had a chance to live the promise of a freer life.
Yay!
When the SLDF rolled into Amaris' capital, they found the streets full of jubilant celebration upon their arrival, and Amaris' chancellor hanging from a lamppost. The government of the Rimworld's Republic was utterly crippled.
Well, that ended very Mussolini-ish.
Its soldiers dead, surrendered or defecting. Its bureaucracy in pieces and its government stockpiles either seized by the SLDF or looted by growing warlords. Kerensky was not interested in garrisoning these worlds with any force. He aimed to rapidly move on as inner-sphere houses rapidly mobilized their own forces to absorb portions of the once mighty Rimworld's Republic for, provisionally, their own good.
Yeah, for their own good.
It's free real estate.
Yes.
Through great house annexation, many worlds of the Rimworld's Republic would, in time, become the periphery-facing territories of the Lydran Commonwealth and other nation-states. Some would splinter off to become pirate kingdoms, fiefdoms, and micronations.
So that's part of the reason the House Steiner is so financially powerful. That is part of the reason right there.
In time, others would disappear completely, content to be ignored by the galaxy at large. Kerensky did not have time to think about the fate of the Rimworld's Republic. Again, he took time to consider the path forward. The Rimworld's campaign had taken a toll on his forces, but by now...
Really? So, House Steiner and the Lyran... I would have thought that the industrial power base that had been built up would lend us something for that.
The SLDF was well practiced in moonlight acquisition. Every world they conquered, they stole supplies of armaments, tech, and parts from the Rimworld's Republic military and defensive industries storehouses. Every time a ship became stranded, damaged beyond repair, or decrewed, they stripped it for parts and moved on. Every time a regiment was appreciably reduced in manpower, Kerensky would fold in another and then keep fighting. The once fairly green pre-periphery insurrection SLDF was now a veteran of many hard campaigns, each and every unit filled now with hardened, battle-scarred veterans. While equipment would be maintained, the SLDF was slowly losing its strength all the same. Kerensky knew that they needed time to rest, for training camps to be set up, and for new blood to fill its depleted ranks. Kerensky, being not a moron, decided to wait a few years to rebuild and thoroughly explore how to utterly destroy Stefan without eradicating the cradle of humanity in the process. Amaris had spent his time digging in. The Rimworld's Republic army is slowly making the hegemony a death trap. Each and every world prepared for invasion that was not only possible, but now inevitable. Cut off from his beloved Republic and watching Kerensky smash it from afar had made Amaris a wee bit bitter. This steeled his resolve to resist at all costs, for there was no going home now.
The wee little baby is throwing a tantrum in his little baby bye.
There was also the consideration of watching your own home slowly burn and what that does to a man.
Yeah.
In the case of Stefan Amaris, it drove him slightly crazy. Crazier.
There we go.
For years now, the heart of Starleague had been under the thumb of Stefan Amaris. His atrocities would become a bleak mark in the history books of mankind. Weekly and sometimes daily, Amaris would broadcast his message to loyal subjects of his empire, while controlling the spread of information he did not approve of.
Right.
Rumors of brutality, murder, and chaos had escaped Amaris's empire, at extreme cost in some cases, but there was little in the way of hard data or information. SLDF fleets and observers had tried to gather extensive information, but it came at a cost. The SDS and drone fleets were a lethal countermeasure to SLDF curiosity. Amaris in his own dispatches painted himself as the liberator of the hegemony, the conqueror of a corrupt noble house, the man who slew the tyrants of the Cameron line, and was now a guiding hand toward a prosperous future. Some chose to believe these lies. Others found themselves incapable of such self-deception. Kerensky took another tactic. Firstly, while gathering intelligence for the push to the hegemony, Kerensky began a PR war. Publicly, he thanked the great houses for not aiding Amaris in his criminal actions. He spread the rumors he knew, painting Amaris to be an incompetent, tyrannical, and ruthless dictator interested principally in punishing those who did not fall in line. Kerensky aired Amaris's dirty laundry, showing the inner sphere who he truly was.
Kerensky got a hold of his WikiFeed account. That's what happened.
Simultaneously, behind the scenes, Kerensky met with the leaders of the great houses. His message was simple. Get off the fucking fence and choose a goddamn side, because I'm about to drop a hammer on this asshole. Something like that. Their response was mixed. The lords made a laundry list of excuses for their failures to support the general up to this point, to include inevitably the threat of Amaris conquering them if they played sides. One by one, however, they agreed to give the general some support, some in the form of supplies, some in the form of intelligence, some in the use of bases from which to stage for invasion. Needless to say, it was significantly less than full support for Kerensky's cause, but it was at least not support going to Amaris.
Token support.
Surprisingly, help came from a different avenue. After the general went public, addressing the need to put down the tyrant Amaris, Kerensky found a wave of volunteers. Soldiers, sailors, marines, aerospace jockeys, and Solaris fighters, all from house militaries, began to arrive, often with stolen equipment.
Nice.
Totally AWOL, these units pledged to follow the general in order to set things right. Many of these men and women felt their own houses had been incredibly dishonorable in not helping the general and so set things right by their own hands. Kerensky didn't turn them away and organized them into volunteer corps. By the time the invasion begun, he had 36 fucking regiments of them. Operation Chieftain, the invasion of the Terran hegemony, was launched July the 14th, 2772. The painstaking retaking of the Terran hegemony systems from Amaris would ultimately cost millions of lives and several years. The Rimworld's military, realizing their own homes had been destroyed and occupied, realizing that their homeworlds were now fighting each other for territory burning or unlivable, made every effort to fight to the bloody end. There was no retreat for them, for Amaris' plans had never included fight an angry Russian tooth and nail for the future of the Inner Sphere. For those foolish enough to surrender, Amaris' political troops would kill them first. This was a grand defense in depth conducted across the hegemony, with the aim being to draw the SLDF into a war of attrition and slowly grind them to dirt. Kerensky's plan was expensive in manpower and equipment. The terrifying space defense systems had to be overcome, and even with extensive intelligence gathering from hidden fleets, clandestine operations, and even reports flying in from the hegemony from various insurrection groups, it was to be a bloody affair. Kerensky's SLDF had been honed into a remarkably efficient fighting machine, now no longer a mere defense force, but an avenging army of an ideology. Star League and all that it represented. So long as the fleet moved and the army fought, for their fellow brother and sister, Star League was alive.
Yes.
Kerensky's battle plan was to cut off world after world. From the outside in, slowly Kerensky encircled the hegemony, and he struck with purpose and precision. From July 2770 to January 2777, Kerensky took world after world away from Amaris. Amaris' forces had nowhere to run, and they fought like cornered beasts.
Protect the Golden Corral at all costs.
They burned fields, cities, and worlds. They used every weapon they had. Atomics, biological weapons, suicide attacks. They tried to grind the SLDF down. They used the human population as shields.
Of course.
They forced Kerensky to pay for progress in bodies and take his time in doing so. Kerensky's strategy was to cut the invasion corridors into slices and put 2 armies in each. Raiding units under Aaron de Chevalier had learned much, namely that the SDS systems in place were not to be trifled with, and that the worlds were reinforced all to hell. The plan then became to cut the hegemony apart from the outside in, to maintain constant pressure so that reinforcements could not be shuffled from one point to the next, and thereby denying Amaris the benefits of a defense in depth. It was important to not stop the pace of the invasion once it started, otherwise Amaris could shuffle and dig in.
True.
What they found when the invasion started horrified the SLDF. It would take the deployment of the SLDF's full 1,000 infantry regiments to conquer many built-up worlds, as Amaris had built terrifying defenses.
Oh,
Some
God.
worlds were no more than awful killing fields, with Kerensky unwilling to authorize weapons of mass destruction for a decisive or quick victory. When the local forces were defeated, infantry divisions earned their keep hunting down hegemony security forces, pro-Amaris paramilitaries, and brainwashed citizenry, afraid Amaris would punish them if they didn't fight the SLDF.
Oh my
The pace
God.
of the conflict made Kerensky fully aware that this would not end easily. He sent in forces to set up legitimate judiciaries to judge and punish those who assisted Amaris' regime and its many excesses. He sent in the SLDF Logistics Corps, now well-trained to strip useful materials to replace his stockpiles, and he ordered garrisons left to ensure that the chaos of the Rimworld's Republic collapse would not repeat in the hegemony.
Good.
Kerensky arrived, conquered, and left functioning governments and infrastructure in his wake. This was not a blitzkrieg to tear down a government. This was a true liberation. Still, the cost would be in human lives.
Yes.
The Star League Defense Forces found the drone ships and space defense systems were manned by elite teams now all too familiar with their operations. Despite thorough strategic considerations, the SLDF found itself utterly incapable of attacking the SDS systems without serious losses. Each and every attack was at enormous cost, losing ships they could no longer replace. Groundside, Amaris' forces would respond to invasion by falling back to extensive fortifications and using every weapon at their disposal, to include nuclear warheads and chemical attacks. Amaris' troops were content to burn a world, its population, and even its future habitability to cinders to deny it to the SLDF. After all, denying a world was not that grand a gesture for someone who'd already lost their home. Each of these battles cost the SLDF personnel and time, in many cases to capture worlds heavily scarred by total war. Despite successes, the war was slowing considerably. By 2774, the operation was grinding to a halt. They'd conquered 100 worlds, but the pace was slowing exponentially. Total casualties were at 10% across the SLDF from the start of this campaign, significantly higher in systems guarded by SDS systems. No matter their strategy, planning, or talent, the pace of invasion was slowing. Often enough, the SLDF encountered horrific conditions among the population which they then had to safeguard and look after, eating into shrinking supplies.
This entire progression of this war has been it's one thing to liberate a population that hasn't been in the conditions that the hegemony's population has been in. It's another thing entirely to liberate a population like this, where you're not just liberating the population, you're inheriting a humanitarian crisis.
Garrisoning these worlds depleted manpower, and taking care of a population was a further complication, but Kerensky saw it as his duty.
Thank you, Ripoff. What's up, bud? Fun fact about the Greenhaven Gestapo, they adopted that name after a newspaper mockingly called them such after they committed some war crimes because their leader thought it was funny/good marketing. Why am I not surprised? It's like, let me name myself after some... Limitless dickishness. Limitless dickishness, warpugs. Oh my god, this is brutal. Let's keep it up.
And did not shrink from it.
Thank you, Ripoff.
Further,
I
Amaris'
appreciate it,
troops
bud.
had now formed the opinion in mind that the best sort of shield was human, and forced civilian populations into internment camps, booby-trapping them thoroughly so any who ran or were careless died in a messy fashion. This was how Amaris' men often managed to fall back, by throwing civilians and hostages into the mix and leaving the SLDF to solve the moral quandary. The SLDF was almost at breaking point, until Amaris made a rather fateful decision.
Oh.
He ordered abandon what he considered to be indefensible worlds without SDS systems or, to his taste, extensive fortifications. He pulled his forces back and reinforced what he had, concentrating his armies into what were already supremely reinforced defensive positions with years of enhanced fortifications. The SLDF quickly jumped on these undefended worlds, glad to gain ground with no loss of fleet resources.
Sam, thank you, bud. I appreciate it, bud. In Battletech, kindness comes at a cost. And this is why in 40K, they don't even do kindness. Kindness doesn't even enter the absolute... It doesn't even enter the entertained thoughts of half the people. Sam, Ripoff, man, thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
Unfortunately, even with this new gain of ground, it was there that the invasion hit a snag. Losses to ships and personnel were piling up.
Yeah.
Surviving in newly functioning Star League bureaucracy was having massive issues upkeeping Kerensky's forces. Further, the massively reinforced SDS systems were nearly impenetrable. The war had destroyed cities and populations.
Oh, that's
in the
different,
crossfire.
Jalen.
Millions of people were starting to call for the general's head for the destruction he had wrought up to this point. Many more millions were dead and cold in the ground. Kerensky decided to halt the campaign while the SLDF rested. There would be no fighting for months as new bases were built. Supplies were stockpiled, forces rested, weapons repaired, and the problem of the SDS systems yet to be overcome. This would be an opportunity for the SLDF to regroup and prepare for the final push to Terra. Worlds began the slow process of healing, doing their best to overcome massive infrastructure damage. Soon, Kerensky had another issue.
What was that?
Fucking Kurita. House Kurita had been a thorn in the side of Kerensky from the start. From opposing fleet movements and supporting Amaris, at least well unofficially. Soon, Kurita made a proper power play. He arrived on hegemony worlds bordering his territory, worlds free of Amaris' forces, with what Kurita called a relief force.
Am I about to want to powerbomb Kurita through a table? I mean, is that about to happen? I'm just asking. Let's go.
The Kuritan Relief Force was a giant fucking army with civil servants, engineers, and bureaucrats. Essentially, Kurita was annexing territory and seeing if the general would stop him.
Right.
And while Kerensky thought about slapping the shit out of him, he really couldn't fight a two-front war. He publicly rebuked Kurita, pulling his forces back, and realized in the end it didn't matter anymore. He now had the forces not tied down in garrison, and at least the people of that world would have a government and assistance. Even if it was awful, Kurita, Katana, wearing asshats talking about honor and stuff. Kerensky couldn't afford to deal with the Kurita bullshit at this time.
Right.
He was thankful he could bring his forces to fight instead of garrison duties. Realizing that Kerensky wasn't going to drop 50 megatons of Russian whoop-ass on them, the other houses soon followed suit, annexing parts of
50 megatons of Russian whoop-ass.
the hegemony for safekeeping, humanitarian
Safekeeping,
reasons, or
of course.
whatever bullshit they could offer for the land grab. Only House Davion was upfront with Kerensky, saying that they'd take the worlds off his hands in exchange for full support, militarily, logistically, and to some extent financially. When Kerensky stuck that deal with Davion, Houses Liao and Steiner followed suit. Kurita didn't, though, because Kurita is an asshole, and will always be an asshole.
Okay.
Prove me wrong. With resources now flowing into the SLDF and garrisons now free to assist in the final push toward Terra, events would soon take an interesting turn.
So basically, even though Kerensky's winning this war, he's going to wind up losing it at the end of the day. He's just going to wind up losing it at the end of the day. He's going to lose the hegemony because dickheads. That's what's going to happen. Badman Inc., thanks, bud. I just want to say, love your content. First time I caught the actual stream, but I couldn't miss this one. Sadly, I got to go to work in 6 hours. I haven't been to bed yet. I'll catch you in later. Dude, you have a nice night. Have a good time at work tomorrow. We're going to be doing this. We're going to be doing this a lot. We're going to be doing this quite a lot here. All right, let's get on. Thank you guys so much. I really do appreciate it, guys.
January of 2775, Kerensky's extensive intelligence services became aware of a disturbing new development. Amaris' forces would exfiltrate a world, stripping it of its resources, and then setting it alight with nukes before leaving. These worlds were abandoned and destroyed to tighten Amaris' defenses further, but also to deny staging points.
1 second, I gotta discuss things with the wife again. 1 second. All right, there we go.
For Kerensky, being that he was not a monster and genuinely gave a shit, this set Kerensky into action. Amaris, in the past had used nukes defensively, like one might use a fly swatter, but it was always against the SLDF, or the SLDF and anything near it. Nukes are nukes after all.
True.
However, at this point, Amaris was intent on creating a huge problem for Kerensky at any cost. Kerensky sent 12 Army Corps forward to immediately land on those worlds, and what he found horrified him. Amaris had turned his nukes on civilian populations. As his men evacuated worlds, they bombed cities, fields, and factories so that Kerensky would have to move in, save, and take care of an irradiated, starving population. And as a tactic, it worked. Amaris knew Kerensky's character. Amaris...
I told you, dick move after dick move. Here's a humanitarian crisis for you. Jen Havoc, thank you so much, man. Appreciate it. And hey, have a good rest of your day at work, bud. Catch the VOD.
was playing to Kerensky's guilt over causing the casualties he had thus far. Kerensky's savior complex required him to intervene, but Kerensky did so smartly. He involved the great houses for two reasons. One, they wanted the territory and didn't care if the planet was a little roughed up.
Right.
Two, Kerensky wanted them to see firsthand how fucking crazy Amaris was. They took the territory and the lesson. Amaris would have zero possibility for assistance from outside, other than what he currently held. There was, however, a glimmer of good news in all this mess. When Kerensky liberated Nagasaki, he found a place a very bad way. The world was nearly ruined. SLDF forces saved what and who they could, but they found a certain place had been thoroughly ransacked by Amaris during the occupation. The Nagasaki Computers Collective had been on the forefront of artificial intelligence, and when Amaris took over the SDS and automated drone systems, he ransacked their offices, deported their lead researchers to Terra, and burned everything and everyone he couldn't take.
Kurita's gonna turn on Amaris because Amaris destroyed the center that they were developing waifus at. It's going to happen now, Warpugs.
However, in the depths of the facility, Dr. Catherine Glimp had years before hidden a hard drive with all the data on the SDS that Nagasaki Computers Collective had ever researched. These blueprints, schematics, and documents proved it was possible to jam the control system used for combat command and control of the drone units and the links between them. With this information, it would be possible to fight an SDS and win, though at a cost. Within the weeks, though, the SLDF had an edge, and soon, the war was on the road again. The closer to Terra the SLDF advanced, the worse it got. Even with the edges they had, the numbers they had, the training and experience they shared, Amaris had by this time again drawn his forces into tighter and tighter defensive lines. By concentrating his defenses, the Rimworld's Republic forces, plus their new regiments, had made the war more difficult the further Kerensky advanced. By the time the conquest of Terra was on the table, it was 2777, and the SLDF was down to 35% of its pre-war forces.
My God!
Many veterans of the war had been fighting for so long they'd forgotten how the war started. Many had been injured, rotated out of action, and then rejoined their old unit, now merged into the remnants of 5 others. Some veterans bore scars of 10 or more years of hard fighting. Some veterans had fought for over a decade to find their homeworlds burned and their family long dead. For them, there was nothing but duty, really. They were invested in the outcome of the war just to see it done. Amaris had to be brought to justice. That's all there was to it anymore. Through all this, they'd remembered their oaths. The Star League was alive so long as they fought. The final liberation of Terra started January 23rd, 2777. And in itself, it took over 2 years of brutal fighting.
Good
The road
God.
to Terra had been punishing in the extreme. The majority of Kerensky's ground forces were dead, destroyed, disbanded, or lost, and half of his navy was littered between the periphery and the cradle of humanity. What ships they had left were held together largely by the salvaged remains of their sister vessels. Few ships, if any, bore no mark of the war in some major way. The crews, however, were hardened fighters willing to see through to the end. The road to Terra was going to cost them more than they thought. By this point, as stated, the other houses of the Inner Sphere saw the writing on the wall and decided to back the general, not the usurper. There were
Right.
precious resources at last to afford a final operation, one last huzzah. Military supplies and refugee assistance poured in from the Capellan Confederation, the Lyran Commonwealth, and the Federated Suns. Not House Kurita, though.
Of course not.
Again, A most shameful display. As a
Yes.
historian, I can think to only say this. Kirita has always been kind of a dick. Just saying.
Yeah.
Anyways, with such backing, with financial and material assistance, with fresh blood and parts and equipment, Kerensky proceeded toward the endgame. January 23rd of 2777, Kerensky invaded the most heavily defended world in the known galaxy. Pardon me for phrasing it this way, but you don't just walk into Terra. Terra had been reinforced over the centuries to be impossible to invade. Only Amaris had ever succeeded in conquering it through generations of preparation by his dynastic line. The exploitation of an idiot First Lord, brutal cunning, and sheer audacity.
Right.
Terra had been turned into a jewel of an interstellar empire by the Golden Age and the wealth of Star League, and then reinforced by a government that saw defense spending as a great way to create jobs and create peace of mind.
Uh-huh.
And
Peace
these
through
weren't just the
strength.
greatest space defense systems ever made. No. They were now manned and operated by people who had spent years training for this. They were manned by people who had nothing to lose, and were more than willing to go down in a blaze of glory.
Guys, before we get started in the invasion of Terra, let's everybody get up, stretch. I'm going to go refill my water. I'll see you guys in 3 minutes, okay? I'm going to refill my water. We're going to get back to this. We're doing it all tonight. We're doing it all tonight. Okay. Coming and sitting back down. Mechwarrior, one of the first video games I ever played was Mechwarrior 3. It was one of the first things I ever played. Was it Mechwarrior or Mech Commander? I think it was Mech Commander. And I gotta tell you guys, it was so fun. It was so fun. Yeah, I played I played a lot of the Mechwarrior games. Well, not a lot. Comparatively to the other things I've done, I played a decent amount. And Smoke Jaguar was my favorite clan, by the way, just based off name. Shaky, 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 shaky. So, let me just stop right here while everybody's getting their drinks and stuff like that. Everybody you're getting your drinks. Let me see what I have here, because I know I have stuff. Okay, I have BattleTech. I also have Mechwarrior 5 Mercenaries. And I don't have any of the DLCs for Mechwarrior 5. I don't have any of those, but I do have Mechwarrior 5 itself. So that might be a little bit of fun to do. St. Healy Lord, yeah. DLC's worth it. I'd have to figure out, you know, basically what to do, how I'd want to do stuff, you know? All right, let's get into it here. Got over 2K in Mercs? Really? Okay. All right, let's get back into this. Hope everybody's sitting back down. Good to go. Whammy best heavy. You know what? I've always been a fan of the catapult for some reason. LRM-20s are... When you can launch enough LRM-20s to devastate a continent, you're automatically good to go in my book. I'm just saying. All right, here we go.
Let's touch on these obstacles to assault before you could even land on Terra.
Okay, let's go.
First issue was the space defense systems. These were enormous battle stations guarding the jump points. I'll talk about the KF drive and jump ship someday, but let's just say this. Most, if not all, traffic into a star system comes from the jump points located at the zenith and nadir points of the star, where you will find the jump stations. Around these jump stations in the Sol system, the Terran wing of the space defense systems had built enormous battle stations ready to beat the brakes off anyone who jumped through. Anyone who's played EVE Online would probably recognize this as the classic old-school gate camp, salt harvesting included. Further in the system, there were enormous batteries and defense systems located on Luna, in stations around Terra, and on the ground. Further, there was the single most expensive and advanced drone ship system ever built. Okay, what's a drone ship? Alright, imagine a warship weighing many thousands of metric tons.
Okay.
Now imagine it's completely filled with computers designed to detect and murder intruders. Fill it to the brim with weapons and armor. Then, since it's not filled with meat bags, keep in mind it can maneuver and fly like a goddamn missile. Also, since it's not filled with mouth breathers, it can take a tremendous amount of damage and keep fighting. Lastly, these were directed and driven by thinking AI that had no compassion, knew no fear, felt no pain, and were willing to do anything to accomplish its objective, protect.
And they were designed by people who knew who Amaris was and what he'd want. Okay, here we go.
Terra. There were 250 of these fucking things waiting in the Terran system. They were on active patrol, they were ready to respond, and instantly set to attack at the first sign of trouble. They were so adept at their job that SLDF scout vessels had to routinely pop in to observe from out in the Oort cloud to avoid being absolutely murdered by the drone systems. And that's not the best part. Amaris had even ordered the enormous sunshade protecting terraform Venus to be moved and used as a giant sun laser. Yes, Amaris had gone bonkers and become Dr. Evil at this point. The fragile sunshade tore when they maneuvered it, and Amaris got really mad. Venus went from a paradise world to inhospitable within a single generation. I mention this in detail not because I trend toward tangent, as you know I do, but I want you to understand. This was Amaris' thinking. Have a huge pile of military assets and go, no, I want a giant space doom laser powered by the sun. Mr. Editor, I want you to add Venus to the list of things Amaris ruined.
Okay. Let's read this list. List of things Amaris ruined so far. Freedom, democracy, the democratic process, Bibs, Golden Corral, public access television, long-standing military traditions regarding honor and serving the state. Karita. Reasonable agreements on limitations of nuclear weapons. He ruined Seattle and Tacoma, the Seattle-Tacoma region, the Cameron family line, Richard Cameron's face meets, wearing a bathrobe to work, inner-house political balances, reasonable battleship displacements, and Venus. Okay, then.
Thank you. Closer into the system, there were extensive service batteries located on Luna and stations surrounding Terra and, of course, on the planet itself. Batteries designed to eliminate any approaching fleet on their own through massive, accurate fire at standoff range. Now, once Kerensky was past all these space-based problems, if even he could manage that, he would have to invade Terra itself. Each and every major city on the planet was fortified and manned by fanatically loyal divisions willing to die for the self-crowned emperor.
Great.
They'd seen their homeland disappear and realized there was nothing left to fight for but Emperor Amaris. After all, escape was now impossible. Amaris had long kept his elite, most fanatical and most talented division close to home. He drilled them endlessly for a situation just like this. Kerensky had spent a long time thinking about this day. He'd been left for dead in the periphery and then rose again to conquer it. He'd made peace with the periphery, fought a civil war, conquered the Rimworld's republic, conquered the Terran hegemony, bypassed and overcome 1,000 challenges up to this point. He'd beaten defenses engineered to be near unbreakable time and again. He'd kept the SLDF together, gave them purpose, and led them to victory after victory. But he'd never given in to being a monster. No matter the losses, no matter the blood spilled, he remembered his oath. Through his strength of will and the strength of his forces, he remembered and honored their oath. He wasn't just a general at this point. He was Starleague, and Starleague was in town for the big show. Even after all he'd suffered, he didn't act in anger upon the eve of invasion. He offered Amaris a single chance to lay down his arms and surrender, and for him to be treated humanely with the promise of a fair trial.
Oh boy.
But for Amaris, losing a home, losing a nation, a war, and a coup makes a man a bit crazy. Amaris had watched it all burn. He'd watched everything he'd ever achieved fall away like ash in the wind. Amaris refused to surrender in an insane, rambling message.
Right.
Kerensky realized his choice was made, and it was on like Donkey Kong.
Intermission. Okay. Uh-huh. Yes. Okay. It is. Or the cameos. I got an extra goof. Did you know that Denise Crosby left TNG because she got into a fist fight with Brent Spiner over a corn... What? Okay, I was about to say. I was about to. As long as you're Nathan's, he's fine. Black Wolf, you gotta wake up at 5 in the morning. Put the munchkin to bed, dude. And you have a great Thanksgiving if I don't see you before then. Oh. His job was literally gasoline. Nice. So do I. Mine is mainly for when I'm just... what do I even use my Twitter for? Used to be a whiskey critic. Okay. Kirk guys, they don't hate Picard, but they also think that Kirk was a total boss. Okay. By and operate a UHF station somewhere in the Midwest making weird programming. I get that reference. What? Kung Fu movies is great. Nice. Okay, here we go.
Step 1 was to destroy the orbital battle stations guarding the jump points. For Kerensky, it was a welcome challenge. Kerensky had made a career by embracing creative problem solving. Kerensky took 20 jump ships loaded to the gills, carrying between them a sum total of 60 dropships. Each dropship was stripped of weapons, packed with extra armor and craploads of explosives, and then autopiloted into kamikaze attacks en masse to destroy the stations. It was the goddamn drone fleet to worry about. If they converged on the drop points, Kerensky would be cut apart piecemeal if his forces arrived. 2 ships cannot occupy the same point in space, so jumps would have to be staggered. If the fleet arrived one by one, they'd die to the drone ships and their firepower defending the jump points. So, at this point, a sacrifice was needed. Volunteers from the SLDF Navy formed a separate flotilla, and they jumped to a dangerous pirate point in system, an act risking misjumping into God knows where. This flotilla had one objective: pull the drone fleet away from the jump points and take as many as they could with them.
Oh my
so
god.
They did. The Star League drone task force went down like screaming banshees, cutting a swath through the drone fleet. Warships, kamikaze ships, drone ships cut the fleet to pieces. The Star League anti-drone task force hammered the drones at any range, ramming when weapons failed, sacrificing themselves for their mission. The debris field from this battle stretched half the solar system. In the end, the SLDF anti-drone task force died a glorious death. Each and every ship burned to cinders by thinking machines. However, their sacrifice brought Kerensky an opening. 40 brave and mad crews had destroyed over 100 drone ships in a 2-day manic space battle. Brave lads, all of them. With the jump points now clean, 932 warships converged from 8 separate staging worlds and began high-G maneuvers for Terra itself. This was insane, because again, jump points are fixed and there are well-established safety protocols to prevent people from landing on top of each other.
Right.
No one had ever before, and no one has ever since tried to jump a fleet this size into such a small area. But these were extraordinary times. Jump safeties were overridden, and standard protocols thrown away. The order was for crews to jump as fast as possible, giving them 5 scant minutes to clear before the next group flew in. Kerensky made a small speech before the throwdown, and with that, it began.
Thank you, Ripoff. I'm pretty sure Catalyst Games had actually canonized Texas Rudolph P. Checker's character as a former mercenary periphery historian at some point. That's what people have been saying. That's what people have been saying at this point. That they've actually done that. You know what? Hold on a second. let me do this, because it's got to be a wiki article somewhere. All the checkers battle tech. Yeah. Dr. Randolph Checkers Esquire was a historian from Van Zalt. Created as part of the 2019 clan invasion and is based off of Tex. Nice. Nice.
Amazingly, only 20 ships misjumped or had drive failures. Some emerged inside the other before exploding, and still the SLDF plowed onward. Through suicidal
Planet Ohio
attacks against the remaining drone ships, madman sacrifices, and a willingness to get this final task done at any cost. Through the loss of an enormous amount of lives, vessels, and time, Terra was finally open. Kerensky soon made landfall, taking to the field in his Orion battle mech. 30 divisions made the first drop under a canopy of all the aerospace fighters the SLDF had left. All space defense stations were silenced at great cost, and the warships hovered overhead to provide close orbital fire support. Kerensky landed himself to retake his hometown on the Moscow front. In air, in the ruins of his beloved Moscow, he saw what the Rimworld's Republic military had made of once magnificent cities. Needless to say, he was a bit mad at all this.
A little bit pissed off.
He accepted the surrender of the 33rd Amaris Dragoons after they pleaded with him for mercy. Any mercy. Over 2 hours of sustained government-issue ass-kicking. Among the ruins of his hometown, Kerensky found his family, who had gone underground, endured, and formed the backbone of the local resistance movement. From this moment on, Kerensky fought with renewed purpose. He was emboldened because in the ashes of Moscow, against all probability, he found his family alive and well and realized not all was lost. Kerensky ground Europe and Asia beneath his mech for the next 2 years, breaking Amaris's grip on the world one division at a time, one city at a time, one fortress and strong point at a time. From Spain to the Far East, Kerensky conquered a hemisphere, deliberately searching out and eradicating every mode of resistance. Things got so bad for Amaris's goons that they resorted to using human shields and firefights as a regular battle tactic to slow SLDF operations. By the time Kerensky was ready to deal with Amaris proper, the war on Terra was years old and the planet extensively ravaged from sustained combat without any quarter. Amaris was using any means to slow the SLDF down, with battlefield nuclear ordnance being increasingly common. Amaris was in North America, and Kerensky hit it with landings in Mexico and Alaska. He'd done his best to spare civilian casualties, but now was the time to end this madness.
Thank you, Sam. By the way, the invasion corridors from the west coast of Spain to the other end of Russia, that's pretty damn heavy. That's a massive corridor.
Now was the time to end Stefan
Thank you, Sam. I appreciate it, bud.
Now was the time to capture Amaris and bring him to trial. Enough had died. Kerensky took the lead himself. It should be noted that the defense of North America might have succeeded if it weren't for Amaris being a goofy bastard and utterly mad at this point. The SLDF was beat to hell, and Amaris's goons were fighting like mad bastards from extensively well-prepared defenses. Amaris insisted on taking control of the defenses personally, and by the time the capital was surrounded, Rimworld's units were using mass suicide attacks to drive the enemy back at any cost. When Unity City fell and the SLDF marched in, Amaris had fled. As the SLDF slowly approached Amaris's last fortified holdings in North America, there was a pleasant surprise. While surrounding the last of Amaris's holdings on the Imperial City, SLDF patrols encountered a bare handful of hardened survivors. In heavy radiation gear and looking quite like mad wasteland warriors, from the irradiated hellscape of cratered occupied Terra emerged hardened freedom fighters, Among them, Elizabeth Hazen and
It's the
Colleen
goddamn
Schmidt.
Black Watch!
They identified themselves as the ghosts of the Black Watch, and they had a modest request. They wanted a piece of the action. As it turns out, you can't kill the goddamn Black Watch. Nukes are merely inconvenient. Through the
Scotland forever!
coup and the brutal realities of the occupation, the Black Watch had been reborn as the ghosts of the Black Watch and had dedicated their entire energies of every waking day to fight Amaris at every possible turn. Their chief occupation for the better
Exit
part of a
chef for
decade had
Scotland
been vengeance upon the
forever.
usurper. In order,
Fucking
so
love
far
it.
they had survived nuclear bombardment, hunter-killer task forces, assassins, and all the mercenaries hired to make them go away. For over a decade, Amaris had been haunted by the sound of bagpipes in his distant memory, and further memories of satchel charges narrowly missing the opportunity to delete him. For 10 years, Amaris had worried about the possible survivors and had sent his best operatives again and again to wipe them out, and one by one the Black Watch had put them all in the cold ground. And now, on the eve of the endgame, they reappeared to serve once more.
Nice.
They provided Kerensky with incredibly detailed intelligence, noting exact pro-Amaris divisions and operatives, their location, strength, patrol routes, and habits. They'd prepared for the liberation by causing chaos as only they could. And for their last request, they wanted back in the SLDF to take to the field once more and help finish the job. Kerensky said yes.
Of course he
The
did.
legendary Black Watch mounted up and from there on out participated in the final SLDF military operations to bring Amaris down, serving as a furious sledgehammer force and leading the weary SLDF through its hardest fights. It is my opinion that these legendary warriors appearing at this very critical moment gave the SLDF that last necessary push to see this through to the very end.
Nice.
Since they represented the greatness of the SLDF, never backing down from a challenge, taking betrayal and even nukes with a laugh, and always coming back for another dose of glorious justice. Through this, the Black Watch would have their vengeance done. The only thing left
That
was
is a
to
Met
take
giving a
Amaris
thumbs up.
down.
And that is so 80s.
Amaris had fled to his imperial palace deep in the secluded Canadian wilderness, guarded by a final garrison. The final operation was Kerensky, his right-hand man, General Aaron de Chevalier, and members of the 26th and 328th Royal Battle Mech Divisions. The last major battle of Amaris' civil war ended with Kerensky kicking in the front door of Amaris' palace with his Orion battle mech and demanding Amaris' surrender. And Amaris did. And with that, the war came to an end. Once Amaris had ordered his men to stand down, there were only a few thousand left. Earth was a near ruin, much of its population homeless or starving. Kerensky had tried to spare civilian populations the worst of it, but Amaris had not. All in some way bore the marks of the conflict. After capture initially, Kerensky was keen to treat Amaris and his family with respect due as they were still royalty, and laws applied regarding their treatment.
Screw that. Screw that.
Kerensky was, if anything, up to this point observant of the laws and regulations of his oaths. Kerensky made certain Amaris had everything a deposed noble should. His family was kept in surviving luxury accommodation while forces gathered to debate what should happen. That was until people discovered how this had all started. It is of note that the SLDF had no idea what happened to the Camerons beyond rumor. They had assumed Cameron was kept as a captive, and that would be used as leverage if Amaris ever needed a quick way out.
Right.
A bargaining chip perhaps kept in a gilded cage. But that was not to be. 2 weeks after Amaris' surrender, the Imperial throne room was unsealed for the first time since the coup, since the massacre of House Cameron, and within the SLDF found the rotting carcasses of the entire Cameron family. The tomb of House Cameron shocked the SLDF. It gutted them. Kerensky had to see it for himself. Kerensky stood in the throne room for 30 minutes, examined how this had all started, drinking in the details of the massacre and the awful desecration and how the bodies were merely sealed in and forgotten about. Kerensky thought about things for 30 minutes, and 30 minutes only, before he flew out to Amaris's hotel. He had decided on what to finally do with Stefan Amaris. There was no trial. There were no words. Kerensky dragged Amaris, his family, his retainers and advisors out of their accommodations and put them against a wall. And on his order,
Done.
he had them all shot.
Yep, there you go.
Terra
Done.
was in ruins. Star League was gutted. The hegemony, a series of cratered, scarred worlds with displaced populations. The SLDF were now all veteran soldiers without much in terms of guidance, cause, or even a home. Many of them had been wounded multiple times and found ways to continue on. Their victory now seemed, if anything, hollow misery.
Yep.
The fleet was a collection of scarred vessels held together by jury-rigged repairs, stolen parts, and ragged determination.
Is a victory more bitter than defeat? Is a victory more bitter than defeat?
Star League was now a distant idea, a memory that had sustained them up to this point through hell, through enormous loss time and again.
Not even a feared
Now,
victory.
Nothing to show for it. The SLDF was down to at best a quarter of its pre-Civil War manpower. Its fighting men and women shells of the people they had once been, used.
A victory like this... A victory like this isn't even a satisfying one. This is just pure ash. There's nothing good about this. There is absolutely, there's no light at the end of the tunnel. There's no celebration. There's nothing. It's just an absolute disaster in every single way, shape, and form. There's nothing that can make this better. There's no celebration to be had. It's an utter nightmare. It's all that's left to do. You don't even pick up the pieces. You've lost everything. You don't even get to pick up the pieces. There is nothing left. There's nothing left for these people at all.
Abused and wounded by the horrors of war. Many of them factually now had no homes, or even if they could return, they were so scarred and twisted by the conflict they'd never fit in.
Right.
The war had made them ghosts. In the very end, Kerensky had 113 divisions left, many of them severely under strength, missing critical components. Most of them were patchwork divisions made of survivors, volunteers, mercenaries, and replacements. The once proud SLDF was a mob of soldiers reduced to understrength units barely maintaining cohesion as a fighting force. And soon enough, things would get far worse. The great houses, seeing opportunity, began to act. They would occupy the remaining hegemony worlds for their own good, and soon assembled to decide a new First Lord.
No good deed goes unpunished. Here we go.
After the fall of Terra and the death of Stefan Amaris, the Council Lords of Star League made their first decision. They stripped Kerensky of his command responsibilities, the title of Protector and all that entailed. Soon after, they began to squabble for power as there was no rightful inheritor of First Lord. Each lord in turn would claim the title of First Lord for themselves.
Of course they would.
That the council would be dissolved by the lords on 12th of August, 2781. And with that last act, Star League was dead. General Aaron de Chevalier, Kerensky's right-hand man, immediately proposed Kerensky overthrow the House Lords and restore the Inner Sphere without their petty bickering. General de Chevalier told Kerensky the SLDF was with him and was prepared to strike, to overthrow the unworthy House Lords and solve the succession crisis with the might of the SLDF, to bring an end to all of this madness once and for all, to lead them into a golden age, with worthy leadership steering humanity toward a bright and noble future. And Kerensky said no. Kerensky refused because he would not turn his guns on what he'd sworn to protect. In fact, Kerensky spent the next few years trying his hardest to reconvene the Great Lords, traveling extensively, trying to get refuge for the displaced millions, trying to desperately to rebuild the hegemony, trying to desperately restart Starleague, its bureaucracy, its systems of governance. Kerensky visited the Lords to try to get them to come together, to agree on basic humanitarian principles, and above all, continue the Starleague he had fought so hard for, its ideologies being something that sustained hope. And one by one, the great lords of the Inner Sphere told him to fuck off. All of this didn't faze former General Kerensky. He was now an old man.
Right.
He fought his whole life for something that they'd just signed away.
Right.
He fought on, still for what he believed as what he saw as his duty to never give up. But soon, he became alarmed in discovering that the great houses were each preparing for war, to absorb the hegemony in totality, to split it up like spoils and then duke it out amongst themselves for supremacy. In doing so, they were intending to poach the remaining Starleague Defense Force to bolster their now rapidly growing house armies.
Yep.
And that was the final straw for Kerensky. It was too much. When a few war-weary units began to defect to the growing house militaries, and with the portent of war growing daily, Kerensky made a plan. He was going to pick up and leave. Kerensky brought his idea to the sole surviving Starleague bureaucrat. Jerome Blake was the head of SL Comnet and desperately trying to fix the damaged HPG network. He was so respected for his impartial reputation and integrity that in 2780, he was offered the position of Minister of Communications of Starleague, a nation that now didn't exist.
Right.
He was the last vestige of the old regime, the last bureaucrat, the last Starleague official. And it was something he really didn't even notice because he was trying to reinstate the first circuit of the HPG network at the time. His nomination was one of the last few things the Great Lords ever agreed on, other than stripping Kerensky of all power and going back to arguing over who was now First Lord. When Kerensky confessed his intentions, Blake was furious, but agreed to prevent anybody from ever finding out until Kerensky was gone, on a few conditions. Conditions that Kerensky agreed to. With secrecy assured, Kerensky assembled the remnants of the SLDF and addressed its officers in a warehouse, despite having been formally removed from his rank by the Lords of Starleague. He told them that his intentions were to take the Starleague Defense Force, its stockpiles of weapons and technology, and leave the Inner Sphere forever. He said that the spirit of the Starleague was alive.
Wait a minute. Okay.
And all of those who had suffered with him, and that they could leave the coming storm to take the weapons and technology away from the people intent on destroying everything. He discussed, even perhaps to return someday, to restore order and sanity, and perhaps hope. The majority of the assembled SLDF agreed to this plan with a standing ovation. A small percentage wanted to stay, thinking abandoning Terra and the hegemony was a betrayal of ideals. Kerensky created a poll and asked every member of the SLDF their choice, stay or go. Almost 80% sided with Kerensky, and unlike Amaris, this vote was legitimate, and so they planned to run. Run far away off the edge of the known map, to the deep periphery and beyond.
This is the origin of the clans. This is the origin of the clans. Well, shit!
To make this happen, the SLDF more or less stole everything they could. They looted and tore down supply yards across the hegemony regardless of what flag flew over them. Hasty repairs were conducted round the clock in the few reactivated SLDF fleet yards which had survived the war. Military bases were completely stripped. All remaining funds were used to buy supplies on any
The
market.
SLDF became the clans. Oh my god.
This lifetime. On 8th of July, the SLDF issued a single word through the HPG network: Exodus. And at that moment, across 50 star systems, the SLDF mobilized one last time and jumped for a brave new future beyond the reaches of the inner sphere. Their descendants would later return nearly 265 years later, but that's a story for another time. With them went the last vestiges of Starleague. Some of the bravest men and women of the inner sphere. Some of the bravest men and women the inner sphere would ever know.
Oh my god. It's no wonder the clans were like, okay, I know a little bit about the clans. I know that they were basically wrapped up in ideals about honor and discipline and everything else like that, and they were very heavily militarized. And the reason why is their fathers and mothers were all suffering intensive amount of PTSD.
Took part in one last heroic act to save what they believed in by taking their skill set and weapons out of the hands of those who'd used them senselessly. Soon enough, the inner sphere would descend into total war over the notion of succession over the position of First Lord. The succession wars would rage for 200 years without decisive outcome. Rather than slam the door shut on all this, I'll tie up a few loose threads, as I'll know you'll want to know. Maybe not all of these threads, because I'd like to leave room for future talks, so let's get down to it. Jerome Blake agreed to conceal Kerensky's movement and departure in exchange for assistance. Kerensky convinced staying elements of the SLDF to protect the first circuit of SL Comnet, to preserve just a notion of Starleague and the hegemony from the coming storm. A bastion of the old guard, making sure at least the basics of Starleague survived. Blake took it upon himself to preserve as much technological knowledge as possible with the total collapse of Starleague, and to further that, he knew he had to maintain control of the interstellar communications network he'd spent his life building. By 2785, the Starleague Department of Communications was renamed to Comstar.
Oh god, the holy phone company!
Blake managed to gain the support of the House Lords with the communications protocols of 2787 and soon declared Terra off limits, promising neutrality and communication services to all so long as that neutrality was observed in turn. The SLDF units who stayed to protect his mission became the Com Guards, and Blake's doings over time would become legend. After Amaris' death, Kerensky didn't...
Rest in piss to Amaris. X in chat to wish him a good rest in piss. Thank you, Major Crit. Now we see why some call this the Battletech Horus Heresy. Yeah. Like, no doubt. Like, this... The thing that defined the Horus Heresy, like, was not just the fact that even though Horus was defeated, there was nothing to do but pick up what remained and scour the stars. There was nothing left. Thank you, Major Crit. Gear Stark, thank you, bud. The Arendani Light Horses is one of the units that stayed. One of their first Merc units. Gear Stark, I don't know what game it was. I don't even know if it was a game. But I do know that name, the Arendani Light Horse, and I know that before I even started looking at anything Battletech. Period. And to be honest with you, I like that name. I really, really like that name, to be honest with you. Thank you, Gear Stark. Appreciate the fire. Thank you, Major Crit. Thank you, Gear Stark.
Amaris's body, for he feared supporters of the madman might be convinced that he never died and was waiting to return. He also didn't want him buried, so as to prevent the gravesite from being a shrine to the fucker.
Yeah.
So Kerensky dropped Amaris's fat corpse off at the New Samarkand Medical School to be publicly part of their display and studies for generations, so medical students could see what a fat idiot looked like.
Hermann von Schraub.
That is until the secession wars caused such a loss of technology that the stasis system stopped working, and they just dumped his body somewhere.
Nice.
For all we know, Amaris's corpse is in a dumpster behind Golden Corral. The sole surviving piece of the glorious Black Watch, a battle-scarred, irradiated mech hand actuator, was recovered and displayed by the mercenary unit, the Northwind Highlanders, who would preserve and venerate it for generations to come. They would tell the story of the Black Watch, of their bravery and madness and glory. They would keep the traditions of kilts, whiskey, and murder alive for centuries on.
Yes.
When the Inner Sphere needed a new Black Watch, the Northwind Highlanders formed one, remembering the lessons of the old and upholding them as best they were able. The 3rd Star League Regimental Combat Team decided to stay in the Inner Sphere. They loved the Rosselhog district more than the unknown. When Kerensky left, they lowered the Star League flag and put it away. They also lowered their regimental flag, the Arendani Light Horse, to half-mast in solemn observation. Ever since, at every headquarters they have ever had, they have kept a bare flagpole for the return of Star League. They served honorably as elite mercenaries for generations afterward. They would also eventually form the point of the spear in conquering Huntress and driving Clan Smoke Jaguar to extinction in Operation Bulldog. The 81st Star League Mechanized Infantry Division became the infamous 4th Tau Ceti Rangers, surviving as celebrated mercenaries for centuries, applying their hard-won combat skills for coin and cleavage. The 151st Royal Battle Mech Regiment stayed to form the backbone of the Comm Guards and would give them discipline, training, and the military credence to protect the Order until they were needed centuries later. The Black Watch commander Hanni Schmidt's daughter, Colleen Schmidt, survived the war after fighting Amaris as a resistance fighter from her base in the Cascade Mountains. She later joined Kerensky in the Exodus. In time, she would eventually become the first Khan of Clan Blood Spirit and found the Schmidt blood heritage, spawning several future Khans and living on today as an honored blood name in clan society. Major Elizabeth Hazen of Black Watch fame survived the coup, the nukes, the occupation, and fought Amaris until he died as a guerrilla fighter throughout the long occupation of Terra. She earned with distinction the Star League Medal of Honor. She was, in fact, the very last person ever awarded that medal before Star League collapsed. Rather than stay in the military, she tendered her resignation and recuperated in a remote monastery. She also took up falconry as a hobby. When Kerensky committed to the Exodus, she enlisted and rejoined the SLDF.
Jade Falcon.
In Exodus,
Jade Falcon.
she would become one of the 4 founders of Clan Jade Falcon. Major Philip Drummond.
Hey, Ellen. Thanks, bud. You're fine, dude. Don't worry.
A member of Amaris's own 832nd Amaris Dragoons had defected to Kerensky during the Rimworld's Republic campaign. Rather than serve the usurper any longer, he joined the SLDF, keeping his commission and joined the general in the Exodus. In time, he would become the first Khan of Clan Novacat, and of note, the only Khan who was at one point Amaris's man. Franklin Osis, a tank commander in the SLDF 238th Armored Division, would join the Exodus to become a farmer. Completely tired of conflict, circumstances would change him drastically, and after a span of time, he became first Khan of Clan Smoke Jaguar. And some I know will ask, so let's get to it. What about the Periphery? Well, for a time it turned into a total shithole. You see, the Periphery was utterly smashed by its own reckless campaign of hippity-hoppity, get off my property, I have nuclear weapons style of warfighting. And then it emboldened terrorist groups to fight the SLDF, terrorist groups they funded and equipped. Terrorist groups that then refused to listen to the government once the SLDF left.
Right.
After all, those people felt like they were entitled to a piece of the action. Also, while the SLDF had conquered them in an age of reunification, it had also rebuilt them. No more Star League meant no more reconstruction, and many places more or less collapsed. The Rimworld Republic fell apart or was annexed, or one and then the other alternatively. New powers in time rose, but never to the extent of the old Periphery's strength. And for a time, the SLDF itself faded into legend, falling into the memory of distant past. And deep beyond the Periphery, General Kerensky made one last broadcast. It was sent via radio and would have only reached the Inner Sphere 1,000 years later. Interestingly enough, the Inner Sphere would not have to wait 1,000 years to hear the final words of Kerensky. It was intercepted by Task Force Serpent on their way to destroy Clan Smoke Jaguar. It was not a bitter message after all he'd been through, but Kerensky's last words toward the Inner Sphere were a message of hope.
To all citizens of the Inner Sphere, to I, Alexander Kerensky, send greetings. Know that I have taken the remnant of the Star League Defense Force, which has remained true to its purpose, beyond the boundaries of the Inner Sphere, beyond the Periphery. I have done this, neither out of disappointment with those whom we leave behind, nor out of spite or disdain, as some will say. No. We have left the Inner Sphere because we love it too much to see it destroyed. In the wake of the usurper's coup, and the long, bitter fighting that came with it, I fear that my forces would do incalculable, possibly irreparable harm to our society. We are sworn to ward the Star League and its subjects, not destroy it. Thus, we have left the only homes we have ever known to place the destructive capability of this armada beyond the reach of those who would use it, not for defense, but for conquest. Perhaps, with the might of our mechs and ships out of reach, the leaders who now grapple with one another will relinquish their dreams of subjugating their neighbors and learn to live in peace with them. Perhaps, one day, should mankind step back from the brink of the abyss, we, our children, or our children's children, will return to once more serve and protect and guide the Star League in mankind's quest for the stars. Farewell.
That's sad. That's sad.
And on that note, I think I'll wrap this up. So again, thank you for tuning in. I know there's a lot more I could have easily covered, from the fate of the Dreadnought to the history of the Rimworld's Republic to what became of Kerensky and his family. I could have talked about the McKenna's pride, but I may cover all those things in the future, so for now, let's part ways. I just want to say thank you
Will
for
do,
your
Alan.
support. Keep in mind this channel is entirely supported by viewers like you who have opted to give a shit. I appreciate your time and good thoughts and encouragement. They sustain me in some very dark times, and you guys have carried me when I had no hope or want to keep doing what I do, and I thank you for it deeply. This last year has been perhaps the hardest of my life, and you guys have all been pretty fucking phenomenal, so thank you. And well, on a more positive note, things aren't so bad for us Mech fans. We're probably gonna get a lot more people interested in this wonderful setting thanks to Mechwarrior 5 coming out, and well, fuck. Well, refund o'clock it is. Well, at least some people's hearts are in the right place, right? So look, please hear me and try not to be total grognards toward these new folks. You're gonna see a lot of newbies, and they're gonna annoy the hell out of us at first, but I'm begging you guys, I'm begging you to accept these people with open arms and to teach them our ways. To hate
Yes.
planners for being smug assholes, and to trust Capellans and laugh at Kurita and love trash cans. Teach them the story of Kerensky and Tukia. Teach them the joys and sorrows of this great setting. And lastly, why you should always pay your bills, fucko. Be good Mech Warriors. And teach a new generation the joy of what we have. I think we'll be able to make the world a little bit better if we try. Or just wreck them on tabletop and say, welcome aboard, fucko. Anyways,
Attention, free birth scum. I am the Khan of Smoke Jaguar. You have made a mockery of our ways through the use of your weapon known as humor for far too long.
genetically engineered losers who don't understand good jokes say, what?
What?
Well, while he's thinking about that, class dismissed. Those mercs we hired ought to tie him up. All right, boys and girls, to the dropship.
You cannot flee my wrath. I will leave you. And he's leaving. This is ridiculous. He promised he would stay this time.
Sayonara, you motherfuckers!
You dare to refuse my bajol?
Hey folks, welcome to Uncle Bucky's Urban Mech Emporium, the one-stop shop for urban mechs and urban mech parts. Located on Van Zant, 2 miles west of the spaceport by the Golden Corral.
Yeah.
Roll up, get yourself a mile of grits, and then waddle on over to Uncle Bucky's Urban Mech Emporium, home of the all-you-can-drink water fountain, free
Ooh.
balloons for kids, and sick deals. I'm Uncle Bucky, and let me tell you, I got an urban mech for everybody.
Oh!
Need your lawn mowed? Urban Mech. Cousin's wedding? Urban Mech. Keeping the damn Intersphere from taking your freedoms?
Am I being detained?
Urban Mech. Urban Mechs are the finest mech C-Bells can buy. We take H-Bills too. We take gold, we take germanium, we take fancy NM-fancy space rocks, and stock in most companies. Hey,
Okay.
we'll even trade you an Urban Mech for an Urban Mech. We got Urban Mech accessories. We got Urban Mech cup holders, Urban Mech speedometers that go from slow to less slow. We got Urban Mech massaging footrests, rear view mirrors, and even them fuzzy dangly dice.
Yay!
We got bitchin' paint jobs with flames, sick ass metal wizards fighting dragons and shit.
Yay!
We got stars and bars. We got no step on snack flags. Heck, we got all sorts of decals, paint jobs, stickers, and whatnot. Customize the heck out of your urban mech at minimal cost. We got fast urban mechs, slow urban mechs with autocannons, urban mechs without autocannons. One
Okay.
that's like 47 machine guns or something.
Why?
We got one with jump jets. We got one that only has one jump jet that spins a little. We got an urban mech with and without bees. We
Without
got urban mechs with spiky bits, sharp bits, angry bits. Heck, we even got one with a nuke.
Hey, check out this thing.
Hey, my name's not important
and I'm here to tell you about the Periphery's greatest auto mall of bargains. Come on down to Star League Auto. That's right, we got cars dating all the way back to Star League.
Yay!
Who gives a shit if they're 250 or whatever years old? That's some prime age vintage auto for any auto enthusiast. Look at this here Bullane Military Products Rotunda. At a sleek 20 tons, it's the perfect car for any occasion. Powered by a fusion engine, you got nukes under the hood for a quick getaway. Did I mention that it's got a fucking large laser and SRM too? Yeah, you can pass anybody because if not, they're dead. They're dead. It's great. And nobody's gonna tow your car because it weighs 20 tons. Find me a city parking attendant that's gonna tow a nuclear engineered 20-ton car. Also, as a bonus, it's got 4 doors for more whores. Located on Van...
More doors, more whores.
and 2 miles down from the old spaceport across from Uncle Bucky's. And it's not a goddamn
Oh my...
Sir, we have no idea where they came from. Needless to say, the situation is critical.
Oh.
Give it to me straight. Can we spin up enough forces to provide the necessary defense?
Hallo, Entschuldigung, ist das der primäre Kontrollbunker für die planetäre Verteidigung?
Oh God, what is this?
Hey boys and girls, it's me, Mackie the Comstar Clown, and I've got a message from Comstar! We regret to inform you this is the end of your broadcast day. Do not resist, resistance is expensive. Pay your bills, fucko! I wanted to tell you our new You Have No Choice, because there's literally no alternative service plans. Firstly, we want you to know you have no choice in service providers, so we thank you for choosing us. Well,
This is strangely and sadly enough what it felt like in the early 90s, in the early to late 90s, to be living in a small town because you had one choice as far as as far as, you know, phone company, cable company. It just didn't matter.
and with our secure protocols, nothing is secret, boys and girls. By that I mean we read everything. You're welcome. Ow, ow, ow. Now, keep in mind, if you thought about ever complaining, remember, we literally own the money and regulate all the mercenaries and the banks within 150 light years of this broadcast. Good luck, buddy! You might be saying we're a shadowy cabal or a techno-religion, and that's really none of your goddamn business! Can't pay your bill? No problem. We're also the bank, so we'll just garnish your wages or kill you and acquire your estate. No need to worry. Our meticulous record-keeping will ensure that any lingering debt you have will be passed on to your children in perpetuity.
Oh my God.
Thinking about destroying or damaging our property? Well, go ahead, bucko, and you'll find out what 50 cal feels like on your skin. You may ask yourself, how do I know my message will get to its destination? And we're here to tell you, shut the fuck up and call for the money. Comstar's the trusted name and sole provider for the major houses, silly Kerensky and his SLDF, the Republics and that fat con guy, and all the major mercenary outfits. They literally have no other choice.
Oh
But
my
don't
God.
take my word for it.
Security isn't a concern because you're giving your data to the people doing the spying. By reading this piece of paper, you are consenting to monitoring. Oh man, they got me again.
They told me if I read this and said they were not a cult or something, I'd get briefcases of big faces.
I love Comstar. They never threatened my family exactly 6 times last year.
It only took 6 years for my message to arrive, and when I complained, they only broke my feet. I think that's fair because I got a partial refund. It was a coupon for, like, 2 corn dogs.
At least you got corn dogs.
Saw some white ships while I was out. They told me they knew I was up to something, and they put me in space jail.
Comstar! When you think we're watching, we are!
That's disturbing. Oh, Commodore 64, yay! Load Kerensky blues.mp. Okay. Let's go.
Two old friends, never seen again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Left Nagel ring in 27, 23. Climbed up all the ranks with everybody following me. I made the Atlas mech and saw the first lord die. I have the blues, the Alex Kerensky blues.
All right.
I was fighting rebels when I heard Amaris call. He said, fuck all the Camerons, this is my Star League after all. He tried to win me over, but I
Me,
blew
Master
up his
Kobold
own
Commando.
world. I have the blues, the Alex Kerensky blues. Rimworld's
Yeah.
gone, now it's Operation Chieftain time. We split up our whole fucking army to keep these houses in line. Invaded Holy Terra and 100 million of us died. I have the
Oh, nice.
blues, the Alex Kerensky blues. Went to the palace, I kicked down that door. I said, all right, Amaris, time to end your civil war. But I found the Camerons dead, so I cut Amaris into shreds. I have the blues, the Alex Kerensky blues. Star League ruined with no real
Disclaimers.
sight.
Let's go.
All the great houses gear up for another huge fucking fight. Some people wanted me in charge, but I had to say hell no, cause of the blues, the Alex Kerensky blues. So I gathered up my army and I said,
General Motors is depicted in BattleTech. GM?
hey boys, we can't let those red houses have our nice destructive toys. I left the fifth with plague and took the rest out of the sphere. I have the blues.
How the fuck do you fuck up
The
tortillas?
Alex Kerensky blues. Pentagon Worlds ain't so bad, but not all my guys.
They made the
agree.
Blackjack and the Marauder. I know about the Blackjack, I don't know about the Marauder.
Kill a few of them. Send that voice of Kerensky. Made a Star League and
Apple owns a planet named
exile, but it was doomed.
Is everything over there more expensive than reasonable? Do you get... do you pay like 3 times as much for about 25% of what you paid for?
From the start, I had the blues, the Alex Kerensky blues. So I died and left all I had in the hands of my son. And what did he do? He made the clan, stupid son of a gun. And now all they want to do is go and burn my precious in his sphere. I have the blues, the Alex Kerensky blues.
The trek to a new horizon is a long thing. A trek.
All right, guys. This is one of the longest streams I have ever done, and I am glad to be doing it. I don't know who Duncan Fisher is. Keep on going. Okay.
Trek to the stars. A Star Trek. To boldly go where no man has gone before. Or something like that.
Good night, ripoff.
These are the fucking credits.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. This is Duncan Fisher. Brought to you by Sidecorn. Sidecorn. It's got 1,000% of your daily value of goob.
Goob?
What the fuck is goob? Who wrote this? I'm goddamn Duncan Fisher. Tex hired me to read some of these. Let's see. Patreon. Yes. Patreon, where your dreams go to die. This is where you spend your fucking money paying this goddamn misanthrope to do God knows what. Why are you paying for this? This isn't even credits. It's a phone book. Who are all these people? Fuck it. I'm not reading this. I'd rather suck up to Comstar. At least they pay me on time.
So this is the voice actor for a person that was in, like, a game? Okay, cool. That's actually pretty cool.
Okay, fine. I'm back. Contracts be damned. Okay, I'll read this, but I won't be happy. Black Pants Legion, good. So, if I'm reading this right, Catch-22 ate a whole bowl of Fiesta Pale. Jesus, fuck, how do you even do that? It's not even remotely food.
Nice. He was the announcer for the Solois 7 arena in Mechwarrior 4.
I'm just saying this for the record. I'm not wearing pants, black or otherwise. No, this mech announcer flies free.
Nice.
God bless Solaris, and God bless mech pilots everywhere.
Thank you, Sam. GM, we're supposed to make the first Fusion engine a few years ago and had to cease and desist to the fan bases. Had to cease and desist to the fan base and stop giving shit over it. I gotta see that.
Does Amaris always go to the Golden Crow? This restaurant is not great.
No.
They won't even let you put crab legs in the chocolate fountain. This is truly upsetting.
Ugh.
Hi, everybody. I'm George Ledoux, and I love all of you very much. At least that's what this script says. From Neverwinter Nights to Freedom Force to Dying Light to Battletech, it has been my privilege and honor to voice your favorites, to act, and to play a part in all of your fun over the years. If you need a voice, hit me up. Oh, and Tex thinks I'm not an asshole, if that means anything.
This is why you should participate in channel polls. This is a notification bell. This is where it works. Oh my god, the notification bell just never works. Ever. Ever, 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 ever. Thank you, Sam. Okay. Great Death Legion. Haven't I seen something on them before? Definitely. Weirdos. Boo. Goody two-shoe motherfuckers. Much honor, such wow. Land air mechs. King Creep. A reasonably brief history of infantry operation of the Inner Sphere attributed to ground pounders. Alright. Alright, so first and foremost. Oh, yeah, okay. Okay, so let me get off in here real quick. G4. Let me see. Hold on. Fusion. Oh, well, okay. I am newer to BattleTech. I've known about it for years, for decades, but I have not really done much of anything in BattleTech. I have games, I have a whole bunch of other stuff, but I haven't really gotten into it, you know? I think it's a good idea for me to start. We are going to be doing BattleTech stuff every Tuesday now. Whether it's playing a game, doing some stuff, having just general having some fun. But I think learning more about the setting is going to do me a lot of good. A lot of good. Warpugs, X in chat if you had fun tonight. Back in the 89s, Battletech was the big tabletop warhammer. Well, okay. Okay. Oh my goodness. So it's going to be a question of what I want. Like, I don't know. Well, my ability to read books these days is really confined by how busy I am on a day-to-day basis. And that is usually extreme. But, guys, this live stream has gone for nearly 3 hours. Thank you all for joining me. This was a blast. We're going to do this again. But until then, guys, thank you for joining me. Thanks for everybody that joined, everybody that super chatted. And just, if you haven't subscribed, consider doing so. I'm going to catch you guys later. And remember, guys, good times rhymes with war crimes. And now I need to start thinking about how to play Mechwarrior 5. I am going to do the Clanners 2-parter next. That's going to be the next one. I'll catch you guys next time.